Hey guys, I want to say a big thank you to my guests for joining me on this episode. I hope you'll enjoy these stories read to you by Sir Creepington Pasta, Booze and Booze, Let's Read, The Darkest Hour, Danny Dreadful, Vidith22, The Creepy Fox, Horror Over Coffee, J Nightmares, Papa Scare, and Silver Underworld Scary Stories. I hope you're ready for this. When I was younger, my family was extremely poor and lived in a very old mobile home on some land my grandpa owned. This piece of land was in a very small town out in the middle of nowhere, Texas, and was covered in woods. The town itself was your typical small country town where football was king and there was nothing to do but get drunk or high on the weekend. It was also the type of town, along with it being in the early 90s, where one didn't typically have to worry too much about locking their doors or setting an alarm. Now, our trailer was a 2-bedroom, and my parents, always putting us kids ahead of themselves, slept in the living room on an old fold-out couch. My room was directly connected to it, and my sister's room was down a hallway past the kitchen and bathroom at the other end of the trailer. One night, after everyone had gone to bed, my dad is woken up by a feeling that someone is in the room. He looks around a bit and sees a large male figure sitting in the easy chair just feet from the bed. My dad quickly flipped on the light switch next to his bed and saw it was the neighbor from down the road named Carter. Carter was known to be a frequent drug user and was often in trouble with the law because of this. My dad asked him what he was doing there and told him to get out. He responded, "I can't get out. The demons are chasing me, and your house is the only safe one." My dad, who I should mention is a fairly large and terrifying person, responded that if he didn't get out, and get out quickly, that the house would be a lot less safe for him. "If I leave, they'll get me. They've been chasing me all night. If they catch me, I'm dead." My dad's response was that there were no demons, but that if he didn't get the fuck out of his house, that he would be dead. From what I've been told, since I was asleep for this part, my mom also hurled a few threats, and while she may not be big, she was equally as terrifying. I believe it was her anger that finally scared him off. My dad got up and locked the door, and watched through the blinds as Carter decided, since he couldn't outrun the demons, he'd steal our old beater Suburban that my dad always left the keys in. He drove around for about an hour. We called the police, and it took them about that long to get out to us, since the closest police station was about 20 or 30 minutes away. He finally brought it back and was arrested and taken to jail. He was deemed crazy and ended up locked up in a mental institution. The scariest part is that for years after this, we'd get phone calls where all we'd hear is music that would have lyrics like, "I'm going to fucking kill you." These calls lasted for years and followed us from house to house, even though we always had different numbers and would even be in different states. We always thought it was him sending us a message. The call stopped when I was about 12. I later found out that it was around that time that Carter thought the best thing he could do for himself was soak himself in gasoline and set himself on fire. Okay, so this was a while back. I live in a small town in Texas, and there aren't many shops or anything popular. The only fun thing is the fair or carnival, and we only have around 1 to 2 malls. Besides that, our town is very small and doesn't have anything important to talk about, until something happened that I experienced. So, I was staying a few nights at my cousin's, and we usually pull all-nighters, and that means we stay up all night with energy drinks, but we didn't have any food or drink or any snacks, and that's basically what you need to stay up all night, so we snuck out through his window. We made sure the coast was clear because his dad had a camera doorbell, and it would have messed up the plan if we were caught. We got to this 24-hour gas station that takes 20 minutes to walk to. but if you run, you could probably make it in 10 or so. So we run over there. There are a few shops on the path over there, but something weird was going on that night. There were no stars. The only light were the street lights. There were no cars around, no sound. When we talked, it sounded like a whisper. But when we went behind this one thrift store, we started hearing screaming up ahead. We checked it out, and we saw 4 men in full blackout suits. You couldn't see their faces, shoes, or anything. They saw us as we saw them grabbing someone. We couldn't make out if that person was male or female. Out of nowhere, one of the guys takes something out and starts waving it at us. Another one starts chasing my cousin and I. We start running to the gas station because it was closer than home. The guy screamed at us as we ran, and it felt like adrenaline was helping me run faster than I ever had. I couldn't see my cousin anymore and realized we'd split up. I got to the gas station and I was so glad to see he was okay. He told me that the guy who was chasing him gave up on him. We did tell an adult what happened, but she didn't believe us. She did end up calling the police and told them what happened. They searched the area and found nothing. They said they would have to wait until the nearest store opened before they can check the cameras. We left the gas station taking a different route home, and we just slept it off. We are still traumatized to this day. Who was that person and were they okay? We have found no answers to this day. So this happened about 10 years ago when I was in college. I am a female and I was a sophomore at about 19 to 20 years old, and I was horribly naive. The college I went to was a religious school and had several rules that students had to follow. The rules important to the story are: no drinking on campus. You could only visit the opposite sex in their room during visitation hours, and during visitation, the door had to be left open. I was not an unattractive girl, and I happened to draw the attention of a guy who shared the same major as I did. This means we had a bunch of classes together. He introduced himself to me as Andy, and we began talking. He was very tall, about 6'4", and quite heavy. At one point, he weighed about 300 pounds. He expressed romantic interest in me, but I wasn't attracted to him and told him this whenever he brought it up. He would immediately backtrack and say how happy he was being my friend, and he didn't mind that I didn't care about him romantically. I did get along very well with him though, and we hung out just the two of us frequently. The other people in our class began to expect to see us together, and we became fast friends. Andy had a girlfriend when we met who attended another school. He broke up with her during the summer break between freshman and sophomore year, but unbeknownst to me, the reason for the breakup was that he wanted to start pursuing me more actively. When I came back from summer break, something had changed. Andy became more forwards towards me, often making comments about how pretty I was and that I should be with him. I began to become uncomfortable with the attention and told him so many times. I unfortunately didn't want to lose him as a friend, since he was one of only a few friends I hung out with. A lot of those friends I met through him, so if I had to cut him off, I would have close to no one to talk to. Andy would often swing wildly from charming and sweet to insulting and manipulative. He would offer to take me places and help me with things, then would say that I owed him something in return for those things. He would say we were so close and we should just date, since we were already practically together all the time. Alcohol made it worse. I tried to avoid drinking with him, but it did happen occasionally, either off campus or sneakily while in his dorm room. He sometimes used my past relationships to manipulate me into feeling guilty. As a religious person, I'd committed a cardinal sin by sleeping with the 2 guys I'd previously dated before meeting Andy. He brought this up a lot, implying that I was damaged goods because of this. He at one point told me, "I'm the best man that you could possibly get because of your past." Eventually, I caved and told him I'd date him just to see if there were any feelings there whatsoever. This, of course, made him ecstatic, but it also made him extremely overprotective of me and jealous of any attention I received from anyone of the opposite sex. He would call and text me constantly, and if I didn't pick up the first time, he would call me until I did. He constantly questioned where I was going to be and would follow me there if possible. I worked for the college as a short order cook at their late night grill, and Andy would wait for me to get off work almost every night. He would sit at one of the tables for hours, just waiting for me to finish my shift. It began to creep me out, but I chalked it up to him being an overprotective boyfriend. We did eventually have sex, but I was still not physically attracted to Andy, and I was essentially waiting for him to finish every time we did the deed. He made me feel like it was a necessary part of our relationship, and that, because I slept with my exes, I also needed to sleep with him. Despite this, I did genuinely enjoy his company and our conversations when he wasn't being possessive. We tried being in a relationship for 2 months, until Christmas break rolled around. When I went home, I had the chance to clear my head and speak to my family about the situation. My mom especially seemed uncomfortable with how frequent Andy contacted me, and it got way worse while we were apart. He got a hold of my family members' Facebook pages and phone numbers, and he would call or message them whenever I didn't immediately answer his calls or texts. It got to the point where he was calling me upwards of 10 times a day, and I had hundreds of texts from him. I honestly couldn't afford this relationship anymore. After thinking long and hard about it, I called him up. I told him how I felt, that I thought this relationship wasn't working. I said the cliched phrase, "I still want to be friends," and I genuinely meant it. Andy flipped out. He began calling and messaging me even more frequently than before, at all hours of the day and night, swinging wildly from, "You broke my heart, please come back to me," all the way to, "How dare you, you stupid bitch, I deserve way better than you," and he'd go back again. I had no clue what to do. I dreaded returning to school. When the day finally came and I went back to campus, Andy sought me out. He would freak out on me for no reason, curse at me and call me names, then apologize profusely. His attitudes would change frequently, sometimes the next day, sometimes even the next hour. He still waited for me outside of work. He still followed me back to my dorm. He still walked with our group of friends to and from class. When they were around, he would pretend to want to be friends, then wait until we were walking alone and start in on me. He would push me or step on the back of my heels while I was walking and mock me. Then when I complained, he would say he was just joking. I didn't realize it at the time, but he was showing all these warning signs, and I was too stupid and naive to pick up on them. I did tell him I thought we needed to spend some time apart, and that worked for a short while. Andy eventually seemed to even out, and a few weeks later invited me to his dorm room to play video games with him as a peace offering. When I arrived, he snuck me in the back way so we didn't have to leave the door open. He offered me a drink. This made me nervous, but I was an underage college student, so far be it for me to turn down an alcoholic beverage. Everything seemed to be going all right. We were getting along and joking around, so I got more comfortable. I had another drink, and very quickly after this, I started to feel exceedingly tired and had trouble standing. I don't know if he was topping off my drink when I wasn't looking, or if, God forbid, he put something in my drink, but there was no way I was leaving that room that night. And he became very accommodating and arranged for me to crash on his couch. I agreed, but I could tell something wasn't right, so I told him in a drowsy voice while slurring my words that under no uncertain terms was he to try anything sexual that night. He laughed it off, but agreed, and the last thing I remember is curling up on the couch and falling asleep. I don't need to tell you what happened that night while I was passed out. The next morning when I found out, I was horrified. I yelled at Andy, who laughed it off as something funny, that I brought it on myself by drinking. I then left. I went to my dorm room across the campus, crawled into bed, and cried. I skipped classes that day and stayed in my room the whole time. I called out of work. I didn't want to do anything or see anyone. I didn't tell anyone what happened then, and I honestly didn't know that what happened was considered sexual assault until months later. At some point during the afternoon, Andy tried to sneak into my room. I freaked out, yelling at him to get the fuck out. He apologized and told me he just wanted to drop off some things, and he didn't think I'd be there. He had a hot water bottle and flowers. How sweet. Not. He kinda threw them in the room and shut the door as I yelled at him to leave me alone. A couple of months went by. Andy still followed me sometimes, but I told him to back off. He still messaged me, but I mostly ignored him. He followed me off campus on multiple occasions, and I also learned that he'd been following me around for quite some time. I began to develop anxiety about seeing him everywhere, and I went to the campus doctor. I explained parts of the story to him, and he gave me some Xanax and antidepressants to help with my paranoia. I tried my best to function, but my grades suffered, and so did my friendships. By this point, I had maybe 3 friends left who didn't think I was this horrible person that led Andy on, and then dumped him and broke his heart. The icing on the cake for me was when Andy crashed my birthday party. Apparently he asked one of my friends if he could help plan it, but she didn't know that we weren't speaking, so she agreed. He showed up to the park where it was being held, drank all the alcohol, then began telling my few friends that I still had how much of a bitch I was. He called me a whore. He told them I led him on and broke his heart, and the entire evening was ruined. Unfortunately, he was too drunk to drive himself home, so I was nominated to bring him back by driving his car. I mentioned I didn't want to do this by myself, so a friend offered to ride with me to help carry him into his dorm room, but immediately after that, she booked it. She left me alone with him in his dorm room, even though I told her I was extremely uncomfortable being alone with him. She knew some of what happened, but I think she figured I was being dramatic or exaggerating. Immediately after she left, all of a sudden he wasn't that drunk anymore. He immediately turned hostile and threatening. He told me if I didn't stay with him, he would hurt himself, and he pulled out a pair of scissors. He held the blade of his scissors to his wrist, and I took a step back. I was at a loss of what to do in this situation, so I simply stated that he shouldn't hurt himself, but I really wanted to leave. I backed up and slowly went for the door, but he jumped up, dropped the scissors, and grabbed my wrist. He yanked me back from the doorway and twisted my arm behind my back until I cried out. He then threw me against the wall face first, slammed the door shut and locked it. Then he picked me up and tossed me onto his bed. I was terrified, but I told him that if he didn't let me go, I would scream. He covered my mouth with his hand and told me if I screamed, I would get into trouble for violating visitation. He said he was going to let me up if I promised to stay in the room with him. I tried to portray that I was calm and relaxed, but inside, I was scared for my life. I thought if I stayed, he would try to assault me again or worse. I agreed to stay with him, and he let me up off of the bed. I sat up, and with all the strength I could muster, I smiled. I said I would be okay hanging out with him, but I really had to use the bathroom. He agreed, but told me not to take too long. He said he'd be waiting outside the door. The dorm bathroom was actually a shared bathroom between two dorm rooms. In Andy's room, there was a door to the right that led to the bathroom. Then if you walked through the bathroom, there was another door on the opposite side that led to another dorm room. Both bathroom doors could be locked from the outside to prevent someone from one dorm using the bathroom to access the other dorm room. I went into the bathroom and closed Andy's door, then prayed the guys who lived in the next dorm room were trusting enough to leave the bathroom door unlocked. I walked to the other side and tried the doorknob. Miraculously, it turned, and I opened the door into the room of two very surprised guys. I apologized and mumbled, "I just need to get out of there," before turning to leave. They both stared incredulously at me as I ran out of their front door. I left that residence hall and ran all the way across campus to my dorm. All of a sudden, I heard footsteps behind me, and I heard someone shouting my name. My heart sank. It was Andy. I panicked, but the hall that housed my dorm was directly ahead of me. I picked up the pace, and Andy followed suit. He was gaining on me, and it had been ages since I ran. I could see the entrance to my dorm. I had my key out and grabbed the door handle of the first set of doors. There were two sets of doors that led into my residence hall. The first one was always unlocked, but the second set you needed a key for. When I got inside the first set of doors, Andy caught up to me and grabbed me by the arm. He tried to use his weight advantage to pull me back away from the second set of doors and out of the entrance. I fought with everything I had, yelling at him to let me go the whole time. I saw through the dorm window that there were people inside the foyer, and if I could just get their attention, I could get one of them to open the door. I finally managed to get close enough to the second set of doors to knock. The instant I knocked on that door, Andy let me go. He walked away quickly, letting a few choice curse words fly in my direction before jogging back in the direction he came. When a guy from inside the foyer opened the door, he saw a girl who was out of breath and on the verge of tears. He asked me if I was okay. I said, "I think so," then waved him away. I ran to my dorm room and locked the door immediately. The very next day, I contacted my RA about the situation. I showed her some of the messages Andy sent me and explained that he had broken visitation by coming into my dorm room to drop stuff off for me, and that he had just chased me across campus. She was immediately concerned and contacted the Dean of Discipline. They instituted a ban of Andy being allowed to enter my dorm and told him to stay away from me and not to contact me anymore. It took him a long time to even begin to comply. I should have gone to the police, but when I met with the Dean of Discipline, he strongly encouraged me to keep everything in-house. He said, "We are a family, and we will deal with this internally, like a family should." I didn't learn this until years later, but this is the attitude of many colleges when dealing with victims of stalking and assault who attend their schools. Eventually, over the next summer, I told my mother most of the details of what happened, and she cried with me. She was extremely supportive and drove me 5 hours to the police department in the town where my college was located so I could file a report. They basically said since it had been too long since the assault, there wasn't much they could do, but I could try to get a restraining order. I followed their directions and was able to get a restraining order against Andy. He violated that order several times, and it ended up going back to court. The court put so many restrictions on him that he ended up having to transfer to another college while I finished my degree. When I graduated, I got out of there and never looked back. I returned to my hometown where I moved back in with my family and got a decent job. I've dealt with anxiety, depression, and extreme paranoia since then, and for a while, I was terrified he would find me again and finish what he started. I got a firearm card and bought a handgun, that I keep under my nightstand for protection. I've never had to use it outside of practicing at a range, fortunately. I eventually found a fantastic guy who's amazing, sweet, kind, and very understanding of my past. We're married now, and I've never been happier. I'm so glad I got out of that situation. Many women aren't as lucky. Andy, let's never meet again, because if you try to hurt me, I'll probably be armed.
At the age of 18 to 19, I used to pick up hitchhikers and go hitchhiking myself. The 1990s felt a bit different to now. One day I was traveling from Edinburgh to back home, 70 miles. Saw a fella hitching a ride just outside of Edinburgh city limits, with a sign saying north. He seemed to have loads of stuff. Most went in the boot, some in the back seat. He jumped in the front and off we went. He seemed quite awkward, and his accent was all over the place. German, French, English. It felt forced, though. Small talk was difficult. He looked punk, and so, well, we will have music in common. Let's talk about music. He was wearing an Exploited t-shirt, which is a local band. I asked if he saw them while in Edinburgh, as they had played 2 days before. Said he hadn't heard of them. Okay. The more we talked, the more uneasy I felt, and the more he seemed to relax. He had a bunch of piercings, which he started talking about and said he had done these himself. They looked it. Each one was squint and looked brand new. He started telling me about how he had been spending the last year or so, which sounded somewhat off-grid in terms of living. He had been traveling around Europe on a motorcycle he had built himself. Fair enough. I worked as a mechanic at that point in life, so I asked about the setup. He got irritated and changed the conversation. He then got into how a monk had found him half dead in a field and nursed him back to health. He then worked at the monastery to repay his debt, which sounded like something out of a movie. This bizarre story lasted 30 or so minutes. Through the monastery story, he keeps saying there's no need to pull that face, and getting quite aggressive. I mentioned it doesn't really make sense, as you have jumped around 4 countries, and I am also driving and trying to listen to a German accent. He then freaks out and starts smashing his fists on the dash, shouting and screaming how he wants out. Fair play. We're almost there soon as I slowed down to a give way sign. He jumps out of the car, flings the doors open, grabs his stuff, and walks off, leaving the doors open. I got out to close the doors and say sorry to the people behind me who had to wait and witness this. I look over to see where he was going, and he was climbing a fence and heading into a farmer's field. I was a little freaked out and just wanted to get home. The minute I'm through the door, Mom knows there's something wrong, and I tell her the story. She suggests I check the car in case he stole anything, and phone the police. Yep. He forgot some bags. Great. I phoned the police, left details, etc. I forgot about it for a couple of days or so. Then, I wake up to my car window smashed, and the bags gone. heart-sinking moment. Okay, I phone the police again. This time, they turn up and take a statement. I dropped him about 12 miles from where my parents lived, so I wrote it off as a coincidence. 6 months later, I see a Crime Watch episode, a British TV show, where they have a "Have you seen this person?" section. Guess who it was, looking like a suit? Wanted across Europe for very bad things. Entered the UK under false documents, thought to have changed his appearance, etc. And attacked people in a car after they picked him up, hitchhiking. Second heart-sinking moment. Apparently, the punk rock look was a disguise. He was in fact German. I've never picked up a hitchhiker since. Okay, so I'll just start this by saying my dad is a character. All of my friends loved him growing up because he could entertain you just by talking to him. This attitude is what initially led me to question the legitimacy of this story for a long time. Now that I'm a bit older, I could tell this one cuts deep every time we make him tell it. Usually, he talks in a very upbeat, active tone. But when my brothers and I first heard him tell this story, or talk about it in general, his tone completely changes. It's as if the color just rushes from his face. It's obvious he doesn't enjoy talking about it. Okay, now to the story. He was about 18 at the time. From pictures, he seemed like an athletic, approachable teen. He was living in the Gary Whiting area of northwest Indiana. Sometime later in the evening, my dad, who's been a smoker for roughly 50 years of his life, decides to hitchhike to his local convenience store. He has a knack for talking about places or events as if he were there. An odd thing to do, considering the shop was only a couple miles away from his house. Eventually, a truck pulls to the side of the road. It was a baby blue pickup truck, to be exact. Apparently, there were 2 men in the truck, probably both in their 40s or so. Pretty normal looking, to him. He said that the driver was a bit burly and sort of looked like Jackie Gleason. The truck was only a 3-seater, so the man in the passenger side had to move to the middle. No words spoken, apart from the driver asking him where he was going. This didn't strike my father as odd, so he proceeded to sit in silence, not suspecting anything. Suddenly, out of nowhere, one of the guys randomly burst into laughter. According to my father, this wasn't your ordinary laugh, but something much more diabolical. Surely enough, the driver looks at my father with what he claimed was the devil's eyes, now chiming in with the laughter. As you could suspect, they start to go a different route. My dad knew they weren't heading anywhere near the desired destination. He was trying to play it cool, wait for his chance. Luckily, a couple minutes later, they finally hit a red light. The driver slowly crept his arm across the cab and starts caressing my dad's neck. I guess his fight or flight kicked in, and a surge of adrenaline came about. He unlocked the door and bolts out, no looking back. He said he hid near a local church and watched as they drove around looking for him. Some years later, my dad was watching the news when the mugshot of a man popped on the screen. His heart sunk. The man was undoubtedly the same who had picked him up hitchhiking. That man was John Wayne Gacy.
My husband began working overnights a few months ago, so this means my dog and I usually watch TV and sleep the night away before he gets home. Sometimes I'll just draw all night while the dog sleeps at my feet, and when the weather is decent, I'll take her out for a jog or I'll take her to my friend's house so we don't die of boredom. One night, when drawing some fan art for my favorite band, I decided to put my drawing pad down and go for a walk to get a soda for myself, and maybe a pack of peanut butter crackers for the dog. I got the dog ready and made sure my cat wasn't hiding by the door so she wouldn't dart outside, and we left soon after I located the cat snoozing on our couch. I remember this happening around late summer because our town likes to prepare for Halloween 2 months in advance. Pumpkins started to appear everywhere, and my dog liked to try to stop and steal tiny pumpkins from cute displays that local mom and pop stores put up. I can't count how many times I would have apologized for my dog's rude behavior, but that's not what this story's about. I'm sorry I'm rambling and remembering the funny things my dog does. While jogging carelessly and dragging my 70-pound pit bull mix away from her beloved tiny pumpkin displays, a man across the street started yelling something I couldn't make out at the time. Of course, I turned around and asked him what he had said. We had a short and uneasy conversation. "Yeah, what are you doing out here? It's kind of late," he said. "I'm just taking the dog out for a walk." "Why?" I responded. It was only 9:30 p.m. "Isn't the old man supposed to do that?" he questioned. He'll be back from work when I get home," I said. "Oh, really? Does he always let you take the dog out this late?" After the man said that, he started moving across the street quickly and wouldn't break eye contact with me. I started backing away like I was ready to run, but my 70-pound blue pit bull mix started growling and snarling. Somehow my dog knew shit was not right at all. The man snapped out of his bullshit and looked down to see my dog, flashing her pearly white teeth. My dog lowered her head and stared this idiot in his eyes. The man tried to laugh it off and took one more step forward. This sent my dog into a fucking rage. My dog lunged and barked like she was gonna rip his head off. I thank God I had a grip on her leash, otherwise this man would have been doggy kibble. The man finally got the hint and turned back. He said something else I couldn't make out as he left. I don't want to know what he would have done, but I was happy to have my dog with me that night. I just want to add that my dog has always been a very friendly dog, and she's never tried to attack anyone before or after this incident. Again, I'm just glad that she was there to save my ass from some idiot that night. So, creepy guy that's overly concerned about women that walk their dogs at night, let's agree to never meet again, or my dog may take a good bite of your ass next time. I was young when this happened, probably 9 or 10, so some of the details are a bit fuzzy. At the time, I definitely didn't find it to be a big deal. Only recently I've been thinking about it and realized how creepy the whole thing was. My mom believes it's one of the scariest things to ever happen to her, and that she genuinely feared for our safety at the time. We were driving late one night, and it was just me, my mom, and my dad. Eventually we got a bit turned around, and I think this was still a time when iPhones were relatively newer to my family, and not the best quality. So, my dad pulled into a bar to ask for directions. It's completely dark out, and he gets out of the car with it still running and goes inside. A couple of guys are standing on the porch of the establishment, and they're eyeing me and my mom alone in the car. After a couple of minutes, one of them comes out and seems to be coming towards our car, but then goes to a truck next to us. He fiddles around in it for a few seconds. Then he gets out and makes it seem like he'll go back to the porch with his buddies. Instead, he turns at the last second, tugs at our door handle, and sits in our driver's seat. Clearly, he's intoxicated. He's older, maybe 50s or 60s. The car is still running, mind you, and nothing is stopping him from doing something reckless, like changing the gears. He starts talking to my mom, and it's clear she's uncomfortable. He starts saying something like, "Oh, I just want to go on a ride." And my mom is nervously playing along, probably in an attempt to placate him enough so he doesn't try anything. My mom mentions a couple of times that my dad is just getting directions inside and that he'll be back any second. Eventually the man does get out, and my mom locks the doors. His buddies are all laughing and continue staring at us. When my dad comes back out, the drunk guy stops my dad and says he was joking around with us. I know when my dad got back in the car, my mom was furious because she hadn't wanted to stop at the bar in the first place. He definitely didn't see it the way she did. He took it as a harmless drunk guy and that it was fine because nothing happened. Looking back, the situation had so much potential to go wrong. Me and my mom didn't have anything to defend ourselves, and there was nothing stopping him driving off in the car with us. It's amazing the things we brush off at a young age. Only later we've realized how dangerous it could have been. I recently moved into an apartment with my boyfriend. We instantly fell in love with the place and the price. We got approved and moved in rather quickly. The place is in a college town area. There is a bar nearby, grocery stores and fast food places. Nothing out of the ordinary nor sketchy. On the day of the move-in, our landlord gave us our keys and briefed us on the neighbors. There are only 4 apartments in the complex. The landlord said they are very reserved for the most part. One neighbor is very scared of COVID-19, so they stay inside. The neighbor across from us seems to be very reserved as well. Now, I saved the best for last. Our bottom floor neighbor, Cal. As we're walking up towards our place, our landlord said, "Oh yeah, that's Cal. He's very weird." My boyfriend and I looked at each other, like what the fuck does that mean? His windows and doors were wide open. The landlord explained that he did not have AC at the moment. We ignored it and continued unpacking. We had prior plans to leave town, so we did not spend the first few nights there. Upon arrival, we discover why he was weird. When we first saw him, we said hello and made some comment about the weather. He seemed confused and disoriented and said, yeah, okay. As the days passed, we would say hi. He would reciprocate at times. It was obvious that he was socially awkward. If I pulled up into our parking lot and he saw me, he would scurry into his room. I thought it was unusual, but brushed it off. We thought that was the extent of his weird, but boy, were we wrong. Slamming, shoving, and hitting of his own doors started at night, only at night. The slamming and banging was so loud that it woke us up. When we got closer to our door, we heard him yelling. We finally understood why he was deemed weird. This continued for many nights in a row. We would notice that he just stands in the middle of the parking lot and talks to himself. If he sees me, he goes back inside. Things escalated this past week. It was late in the evening. We were chilling and watching TV when we heard a knock. We immediately knew who it was, since Cal was chilling outside with the neighbors. My boyfriend answered the door, and Cal asked if we had seen a young woman walking around. My boyfriend said no, and he walked away. Last night, I came back home from visiting my family. Immediately after I came home, Cal went upstairs. My boyfriend answered the door and asked if we had seen his mom walking around. My boyfriend sternly said no and closed the door. To conclude, this morning at 6 a.m., we heard an extremely loud knock. I awoke immediately. I went to the door and did not see anyone, though I saw a flashlight. I got really scared and woke my boyfriend up. We looked out and saw there was a police officer looking for Cal. From what we can make out, Cal called the police due to hearing a gunshot and a young woman scream. My boyfriend was up since 5 a.m., and he stated he did not hear any of that. At this point, we're on edge with this guy. If he comes upstairs again, we're gonna tell him to ask other neighbors. For an update, right as I finished writing this up, the previous tenant texted me. He stated that Cal was really weird while they lived there as well. Cal would talk to himself. The previous tenant said that he caught security camera footage of Cal going up the stairs near the door and started working out. Cal noticed the camera and went back downstairs. We will be installing cameras very soon. My boyfriend officially went into "I wish this guy would" mode. I also forgot to mention that yesterday, before I left to visit my family, I heard someone say "hello" and shuffle around my front door. I can only imagine who it was. It creeped me out because it was right after my boyfriend left to golf. My boyfriend told me that he heard Cal go upstairs after the police left at 6 a.m., and then he said "hello," trying to get someone's attention. Yes, I know this man is mentally ill. However, it does not negate the fact that he purposely tries to talk to us in the late hours of the night. Compassion is shown, but boundaries will be set. The police were called because we heard him yell and scream for help. They came out and said they already knew about him. It seems like he's harmless, but we're still keeping our distance for our safety and his.
When I was 14 years old, I had to live with my grandparents. I had to live with them because my sister was in college and my parents were getting divorced. They lived in this old bungalow type house. It was one story and we have stairs that immediately go up to the attic. An attic which no one really uses. We just put stuff up there. It's too hot and stuffy up there. The sole window up there didn't really help much either. The attic had old creaky wooden floors that I remember that I had to polish with the coconut shell, because that's how we do it here in the Philippines. That and my grandparents are very traditional. Anyway, my door was near the stairs leading up to the attic. Like you open my door and then face right and the stairs would be immediately right there. I hated that every time I left my room, I would expect that something would be immediately crawling down from the attic. One night, my grandparents had to pick up my aunt's family from the airport, but because of the hellish traffic here, they had to leave at 7 p.m. and their expected arrival back home would be at most at 5 a.m. So a 14-year-old girl would be alone at home the entire time. I told them I would be safe here. We live in a gated community, we have tons of guard dogs, everything will be okay. Or so I thought. Before they left, we already had dinner, so I was stuck with cleaning the dishes and all. As I was doing that, I could hear a bunch of neighboring dogs barking a lot. I didn't really think much of it because the dogs always do that. When I finished cleaning up from dinner, I immediately had to lock every door and window and close all the lights before heading to bed. When I entered my room, the lights were open and it looked normal. My anime posters were on the wall, my closet was untouched. My bed was next to my barred tinted windows. We had to tint them because I was on the first floor, and my grandparents wanted to make sure no one would peep in a young girl's room. They were barred too because my uncle, who used to use the room, always escaped to go out to parties. And this was my grandparents' solution to that. Nothing was out of place to alarm me. Everything was normal, until I shut off the lights. As soon as I closed my lights, a silhouette of a man was illuminated by the streetlights outside. He looked like he had thick curly hair and a skinny build. Thought maybe I was just hallucinating it, so I turned on the lights again, and he was gone. Turned them off, he was back again, On, gone. Off, gone. I sighed in relief. I was just tricking myself, I guess, or something else was casting a shadow. I double locked my door just to be safe. The one with the doorknob lock and one of those door latches type things. I tucked myself in. It was hard to fall asleep with a lot of dogs barking outside. It wasn't our dogs, it was our neighbors. I was finally able to fall asleep when I heard something about me moving. Something in the attic. I just pushed the thought down. I'm tricking myself again. I hugged my pillow. It's just rats, I said to myself. These rats seem heavy, and were also pushing furniture around. My heart sank when I heard them hurriedly going down the stairs and stop at the bottom. I covered myself with a blanket and I waited for something. I was also wishing that my parents had given me a phone at a time like this, but I only waited in bated breath. Suddenly, I heard my doorknob start to fiddle. I wanted to vomit when I heard a click, followed by a quiet turn of the knob. The knob turned but didn't budge. When they noticed, they tried to push it. By this time, I'd finally stood up, shaking. I was a kid, home alone with no phone, no means of defense. All that was saving me was this thick door from the old days. I softly pushed my body up against the door and locked everything up again. I didn't want to make a sound. I didn't want to scream. I did not want him to know that I was here. I don't know why, but he stopped. I didn't go back to my bed. I just stood there at the door, waiting. It felt like forever, and I heard footsteps go up the stairs, but I still sat there. I saw something move in the corner of my eye. There. Out the window, the shadow was back. I forced myself not to look. All I could think of was, thank God they were barred. I don't remember what happened after that. I think I fell asleep or was too scared to even think straight. I just remember the next day when my family and I were finally having breakfast. I casually brought it up. Grandfather, I think I heard footsteps in the attic last night. My grandmother scoffed. It's probably rats. I never brought it up again. I didn't want them to worry, but I do know this. Our dogs were caged up near the gate and were far from my room, so they wouldn't have seen anything. The only dogs who were near my room were the neighbors. Also, there was nothing outside my window that would cast a shadow that looked like a man. Lastly, the attic window was open. Here's another security story I have. Again, backstory if you're unfamiliar with my posts. I work security at a local university with an open campus in the heart of my city, and it's in a really bad area. It's Tuesday at approximately 10 a.m. I just finished patrolling Building A and was about to patrol Building B. There's about a 3-block gap between these buildings. In that 3-block space, there are various stores, namely a Subway. If you've ever been to a Subway, you know that the entire front of the store is all a glass window, so you can see in. Well, I was walking by the Subway and something happened to catch my eye. You see, I was now watching an armed robbery in progress. I had stopped walking, a bit stunned by seeing this. In my 6 years of security, this was the first time I'd ever seen a gun on the job, and the first time I've ever seen such an event. Not only did I notice the armed robber, he noticed me, in my full, bright, reflective security vest. At this point, he points the handgun directly at my head, and I nearly shit my pants out of complete fear. One of the employees managed to distract the guy, and he turns to them and probably threatened her. I was outside, remember, so I can't hear anything going on inside. I take this moment and run out of his view and hide around the corner and radio for the police to be called. The first cop car showed up in under 5 minutes. Once the officer saw what was going on, 5 more cop cars show up, and a legit SWAT dude arrives. They had the Subway completely surrounded. It was like watching a movie. It was actually really cool. The gunman sees what's outside and lets 8 people go, but keeps a single employee. He then, and this is the honest-to-God truth, forces the lone employee at gunpoint to make him 2 12-inch subs. I'm watching him point to the veggies using the gun. If it wasn't so horrifying, it would have been hilarious. After the subs are made, he motions for the cops to back away from the door. Then he lets out his last hostage. Once she's free, he locks the door, takes his subs, sits at the table with his back turned to the police, and proceeds to eat a sub. After he ate one, the SWAT team broke down the door and fucked his shit up. This isn't creepy because I've never been so scared on the job, and the whole eating a sub with SWAT wanting to take your ass down was just bizarre. Edit because I forgot one thing. On my next shift after that, I saw a guy trying to steal a bike. I approached him and said, "Hey, stop trying to steal that bike." To which he responded by removing a Rambo-sized knife from somewhere and just did a light jab towards me. After that, I threw my hands up and said, "Bike is yours," and walked away. I did call the police and report the incident. Again, it's shit like this that makes me love my job. I can't wait till my health is back to normal and I can work again.
In 2012, I suffered a stroke that killed me. As I slipped away, I had felt an overwhelming peace come over me like I'd never felt before. Things went black, then I was ascending above and I saw the city below. Next to me, I heard a voice from this orb of varied colored lights that also had a mist coming off of it. It was a woman's voice, and she was telling me how excited she was to finally be with her family and see her mom and dad again. I started to feel unsure and told her I wasn't supposed to be here. Suddenly, I was standing in an otherworldly place that was gorgeous. All the structures and buildings were made of what looked similar to marble, but it had an iridescent color between the marbling. The buildings were decorated with colorful stones, with gold embezzlements lining the buildings and glass fencing. I walked along the path with my arms crossed and holding to my body. I felt lost, and everyone around me was chattering happily with each other in these otherworldly clothes of satin-like linens. Some people held hands and were close and joyful with each other. This place was absolutely beautiful. I came upon an old man who was sitting near a tree and would seem to be teaching a class with people surrounding him. Some were sitting and others were standing. He called me over to join him. He was teaching the lessons of what life is supposed to be on Earth, what it was originally supposed to be, and how humans were supposed to be caring for the world and the inhabitants on it, but materialism had gotten in the way among other things. I felt an overwhelming knowledge come over me as he continued to teach this class about the world, the universe, life and death. Everyone began to surround me, and the old man put his hand on my shoulder and said, "It's not your time yet. You will know when it is." The people from the class all came in and held me in a circle, and I was suddenly back. I opened my eyes and breathed in. I was alive and back in my earthly body. This is how I came to believe in God and also reincarnation. I don't claim a religion because my beliefs are now a mix of things. Unfortunately, slowly, that knowledge that was instilled into me slipped away over the years, but I feel it in the back of my mind. To me, religion became several fingers pointing to the same being. I don't need a religion to dictate my relationship with God. If you're all wondering, I am 27 now and suffer residual effects that have disabled me, but I keep going. My body may not work properly, but my brain still does, and I focus on expanding my knowledge in various areas. I came here hoping anyone could share similar experiences or give insight. I took a trip to stay in a cabin in the middle of the woods, high up in the mountains of the city of Ranger, Georgia, USA. This neighborhood was 30 minutes up in the mountains, away from civilization, and even the cabins were spread far apart. The front deck of the cabin was completely exposed to the woods, so I acknowledged that any animals could stroll along if they pleased. But I stayed there for about a week, and me and my boyfriend sat outside on the front deck every night, very late, and at no point felt in danger. It was peaceful with fireflies out and sounds of crickets every night. Until the 5th night. It was eerily dark too. The moon was covered heavily. It was about midnight, and all of a sudden, I didn't feel peace like I did those other nights. The forest went completely quiet, and I felt a horrible sense of dread. I genuinely feared for my life. I sat there in my chair, looking out into the dark forest, trying to rationalize and calm myself down that it was my mind playing tricks. But all of a sudden, my boyfriend said out loud that he felt unsafe. I told him I felt the same, and we ran inside. The cabin has 3 floors, and we were able to climb out the window and sit on the roof because we still wanted to be outside and relax. It didn't matter how high up I was. I felt something truly evil and stayed inside. The only other time I felt something so evil or like someone was watching was when I had a few paranormal experiences at a haunted house. Georgia doesn't really get mountain lions, maybe a bear, but it didn't feel that way at all. Shadow, my 115-pound German Shepherd, black lab mix, started to signal to me that she had to use the bathroom at about 1 a.m. Annoyed because I was almost asleep, I got up, put a hoodie on, and took her out with nothing but my phone for the flashlight. She started to do the usual, sniff for 15 minutes just to go in the regular spot routine. I had my flashlight on her because she's camouflaged by the night, and I would like to know where she's at so she doesn't run off. Just as she's starting to use the bathroom, I turn away and notice someone. They're standing at the very edge of my yard. Looking back at my dog, I noticed that she wasn't paying attention to the person yet, so I called her to me and attached her leash. The person just stood there and watched me. I called out to them and said, "You need to leave my yard," to which I got silence back. I cleared my throat and repeated myself, eventually attempting a 3rd time, just to change it to, "Don't make me tell you again. You're going to leave my yard." Just as my partner was coming outside to see what the commotion was, they took a few steps forward, clearly intending to continue towards me, caught a glimpse of my partner, backpedaled, turned around, and left. As confused as he was, I was in complete shock. That person hasn't been back, but right before that, we did find footprints near our shed and windows of our home. Genuinely unnerved, we contacted the police, and they didn't do anything other than take a statement. I was told it would go nowhere until physical harm or a break-in happens. For context, I was 16 at the time, so this was about 4 years ago. We lived on a dimly lit road where crime often occurred. Well, my younger sister had thrown a small party for her 15th birthday in May. There were maybe 6 people. So as it gets to be around 2 in the morning, people either start leaving or stay the night. There was a girl there called Liz, whose mom needed her to be home, but they didn't have a car to pick her up in. My mom was already asleep, and none of us could drive yet. Being the mom friend, I decided I'd walk Liz home as she lived in the apartment near my trailer. I put a pocket knife in my jacket, and Liz and I started our 6-minute walk. Everything was going pretty good, until after I dropped her off. I live on a dimly lit street, and I watch a lot of horror, so I was paranoid as is. That didn't get any better when I noticed a blue car following me slowly with its headlights off. I had a bad feeling, so I called my friend. While I'm on the phone with my friend, I start walking faster and telling her the situation. Well, the car got too close for my liking, so I started running. It speeds up too. Halfway down the road, I run into both of my younger sisters and we walk home together. We get home and I asked why they came. It turns out my mom woke up from a nightmare that I was hurt and told them to come get me so I could be safe. I honestly don't know what would have happened to me if they hadn't come, but it was terrifying.
I'm a 38-year-old female and I live with my husband and 4-year-old son. We decided that we wanted to live off the grid about a year after our son was born. The world's been going in a weird direction and cutting ourselves off from it seemed like a good idea at the time. We bought a small house in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, and apart from the story I'm about to tell you, we loved every second of it. We have a family dairy cow that produces a lot of milk, about 6 to 7 gallons a day, which is way more than a family of 3 can drink. More than anyone can drink in a day, actually, but where we live, people love to drink raw, unprocessed milk. It's a controversial topic that I won't get into right now, but with the excess milk we constantly had, my husband suggested that we post a Craigslist ad to barter our milk. You know, trade the milk for other items we may need or want, like fresh fruits and veggies or farm equipment. We figured it couldn't hurt and that it would be fun to meet new like-minded people in the process. We posted our ad and we didn't get any responses for a while. I started feeling a little defeated about the whole thing, and that's when I got an email from a woman named Christina. She told me that she absolutely would love to trade for some milk, and I won't lie when I say that I was a little excited too. We emailed back and forth for a couple of days, and she told me that she grew organic berries that she would want to trade. I thought everything was going great until she suddenly just stopped emailing back. I emailed her again 4 days later to ask if she got my emails, but again, got no response. It was like she was purposefully ignoring me, but my husband told me that sometimes people get busy and I shouldn't take it personally, so I didn't. I moved on and continued to wait for another person to see the ad. Over a week and a half later, I finally got a response from Christina. She was angry that I had emailed her in the middle of the night, and it was my fault that she hadn't seen it. She said that it was very irresponsible of me to email so late and that it wasn't a good way to run a business. And I was shocked. I looked over my previous emails to her and was confused when I saw that I, in fact, hadn't emailed her in the middle of the night, but in the afternoon. And I didn't understand her comment about this, not being a good way to run a business, because I wasn't running a business. It was a Craigslist ad. I chose not to respond to her because of her obvious problem with me and her incapability to take responsibility for her own actions. I thought ignoring her would have meant that I'd be done with the situation. I was wrong. Instead, she continued to email me multiple times a day for the next 2 days, reminding me of her emails and telling me to email her back. Finally, 2 days later, she wrote to me once again, this time saying something that genuinely terrified me. She said that she was tired of me ghosting her. She was offended and was very angry that I would do that to a sweet old lady like her, and that if I wasn't going to give her the milk, she was just going to take it herself. I didn't really understand what she meant by that. Was she going to find where we live and milk our cow? I showed my husband and we laughed about it together, and again, I didn't email her back. Why would I? Clearly this woman had some serious issues. That night we heard rustling outside of her house, but that was something that we were used to. There were lots of animals in the area that weren't afraid to come up to the house throughout the night. Our son came into our room really early in the morning and swore to us that he was hearing footsteps outside of his window. My husband and I tried to reassure him that it was probably just a deer, but he was sure that it sounded like a person or monster walking back and forth just outside his window. He was scared, so we let him sleep in our bed until it was time to wake up. That morning, my husband went outside to check for footsteps, and to our surprise, he actually found some. Whoever it was wore a very small-sized shoe and definitely was pacing all night based on the deep footprints that went back and forth in the mud outside his window. It's pretty strange seeing footsteps outside our house that aren't ours. We live so far outside of town and own the property surrounding our house, 30 acres of it. My husband searched the forest surrounding our house but found nothing. When I went out to milk our cow, I was horrified to find her covered in black spray paint. Her back was littered with it. When my husband came out to help me, he was just as shocked as I was. I still had to milk her, though, and honestly, I felt a little bad doing it. Cows are very sensitive animals, and I could tell that she was scared and probably in shock just as much as we were. Only when I went to milk her and was massaging her udder, I noticed her bag seemed a little small, almost like how it feels after being milked. Then, when I went to clear her teats of the first few squeezes of milk, there was almost nothing coming out. Someone had literally milked our cow, and sometime throughout the night also spray painted her back. I thought back to the crazy email the woman had left, and I knew it had to have been her. We knew no one else would do something like this. While my husband and I were trying to clean off her back, we heard our son scream from inside the house. We both dropped what we were doing, and when we got inside, we saw a jug of milk on the counter and muddy footprints leading to our son's room. We rushed to his bedroom door, and when we looked inside, we saw a woman sitting on our son's bed with him on her lap. She was holding him tightly, smiling at us with this eerily emotionless look on her face as he squirmed in her grasp. I was going to tell her to let him go, but my husband had other plans. He'd always been the no-nonsense kind of guy, and so he just walked right up to her and punched her in the face. She let go of our son as she brought her hand up to her nose, and my husband took the opportunity to grab him and pull him away from her. He grabbed my arm on the way out of the room and led us out of the house and put us in his truck and locked it. He went back inside, and the next thing I knew, he was physically carrying this woman out of the house and forcing her to sit on the porch. Every time she tried to get up, he just shoved her right back down. She was no match for him. He made sure that there was no way she was leaving. I had already called the police the second we were in the truck, and they arrived about 30 minutes later. While we waited for them, the woman only said one thing: "You shouldn't have ignored me."
I'm a former longtime airborne ranger, having served many years in 275 in Washington State. After my service, I was a Forest Service firefighter and disaster response contractor. Suffice to say, I'm a very experienced outdoorsman, professionally trained. In 2009, I was hiking in the Weyerhaeuser Forest Reserve near Offutt Lake in western Washington State. The preserve was adjacent to the home of a buddy's father, and before setting off into the lumber preserve, his father implored for me not to go hiking in there alone, as it was a very dangerous area, a very frightening area. He'd lived there for 30 years and refused to let his kids ever step foot into the forest. Being a young, confident ranger, I laughed off his superstition and headed out into the virgin forest. It was an unusually hot and humid day in late spring, and I was armed with a Glock 19 and feeling very capable and competent. I'd made it about 3 miles into the forest and came to a massive bowl section of perfectly manicured pine forest with no undergrowth. Just tan spruce pine needle bed as far as the eye could see. It looked like I was stepping down into a forest bowl the size of a modern football stadium. I got about halfway down the bowl, and literally every sound in the forest became totally deafeningly silent, all in an instant. It was as though I'd stepped into a soundproof studio room in one step. No bugs, no wind, no ambient sound, nothing. By this time, I'd been to combat twice and graduated ranger school and was a pretty salty individual, but I am not ashamed to admit I was overcome with a feeling of fear, dread, deep, guttural, paralyzing fear. I gathered myself together and turned around, and practically ran the entire way back to Curtis's father's house, got in my truck and left, and I never went back. I've spent years thinking about what happened in those woods, and to this day have no answers. I was completely sober, fully aware of my surroundings, and in good spirits and health at the time of this incident, with no mental, physical, or psychological issues. I cannot say what the incident was caused by, but I have never been so deeply in fear in my life. Even thinking about it now, over a decade later, makes me feel uneasy, as though whatever was in that forest is still there. All this, I swear on my scroll to be true. Years ago, my parents had their garage converted into an extra-large bedroom, and this was where we all played games. I was about 10, and it was only for the second or third time I'd been left alone in the house, while my siblings were all away for one reason or another. Naturally, I was up all night, playing on our PlayStation 2 in there, having a blast. I don't know how late, but pretty late into it, I suddenly started hearing someone tapping on the window. They really went all out with the extra bedroom, and actually replaced the garage door with a wall, window, and traditional front door you'd find on any house, complete with bolt and doorknob locks. Well, I didn't realize it was a sound not produced by my game for a full minute or so. It was the sound of someone drumming their fingers. It kept going without stopping. I finally really noticed it when the doorknob rattled, and the sound moved closer to the door, which made it more audible to me. I freaked out, and I snuck to the door to double-check the locks. They were both unlocked, but the door tended to jam and act like it was locked unless you put a lot of effort into it. I locked both locks loudly, so the person would know they definitely couldn't get in, but I just heard a gruff older man laugh, and the sound got louder. Then he moved to the back window and called, "Let me in, love. I'm cold and hungry. Don't you want to be nice to your neighbor?" I turned off the lights and ran to my room, and I hid in the pitch dark under my blanket until my parents got home a few hours later from their anniversary date. I never told them because I was young enough to care more about getting into trouble because I stayed up past my bedtime. This happened on Halloween. I'm not really sure if it's cause for concern. I just felt very uncomfortable after. I live with 2 other women, but our boyfriends stay over frequently. I was outside with my parents and boyfriend handing out candy to some trick-or-treaters when I see my neighbor come outside. When we moved in, we quickly met the surrounding neighbors, and these 2 lived directly across the street. Turns out the guy was an addict, and the wife had a medical condition, so she stayed inside a lot. The husband approached me and my family, and was generally pleasant to talk to, before it turned incredibly uncomfortable. After about 30 minutes of speaking, he began to accuse me and my roommates of throwing out garbage in his can. He then went into detail about how he had it on camera, and there was a pair of underwear in the garbage bag. He described the person on the cameras as short and stout. I'm 5'10", and you'll see why I'm saying this. He continues to go on about how his wife was mad at him because one of us did it, but he isn't mad and isn't trying to get us into trouble. After about 15 minutes of this, his wife sends him a photo of my Facebook profile and says that this person's name was on the papers in the garbage. At this point, my parents went in and my boyfriend and I are alone with this man, and he's saying that I must have done it, and kept asking why I put underwear on top. But my roommates and I have never thrown anything in his trash. I found their Facebooks and blocked them because it creeped me out, and he said his wife tried to call the police about it. My parents just brushed it off, but I still feel very uneasy. What do you guys make of this?
I'll never leave the apartment door unlocked again. 2 stories here. The second story is a little creepier. I, a 23-year-old female, grew up in a rural area in Ontario. It was the kind of place where you never lock the doors because you know everyone in town. The all-too-trusting small-town mentality, it stayed with me once I moved to a big city for university. I got an apartment in the student area with a college nearby and plenty of bars within walking distance. I lived with a guy friend, Roddy, who was a few years older than me from the same small town. I would usually go to the bars with friends on the weekends and stumble home by myself around 2 a.m. One night, on my way home, my neighbor, Kyle, and I met in the hallway, both headed to our own places. He was also drunk, and so good-looking. He said hello and invited me inside. I ended up staying the night with him. He was nice, and it was a fun night, if not a little awkward. We didn't exchange numbers, and it didn't seem like we cared for anything to come of it, so I went home in the morning, and that was that. Fast forward to 2 days later. I was asleep in my bed. My roommate was half asleep on the couch with the TV on. He heard a sound that might have been the door creaking open, but he ignored it in his tired state. A few minutes later, he opened his eyes to see a naked man standing in front of him, lifeless and staring into his eyes. It was Kyle. Roddy tried to talk to him and ask him what he was doing here, but he didn't respond. Roddy ran to my room and said, I think Kyle is here to see you. So I followed him out into the living room and I saw a completely naked Kyle staring at us with the most serious and concentrated eyes I'd ever seen. I tried to talk to him and ask him to leave, but once again he didn't respond. Instead, he went into our kitchen, opened the fridge. He proceeded to take out our butter and he started smearing it all over his face and chest, saying nothing, and still with a completely serious look on his face. Roddy and I ran to my bedroom to talk about what to do. While we were in my room, Kyle walked down the hallway that led to us, and he stood in the dark right before the light of my room could reach him. All I could see was his silhouette, and he started whispering, saying hi, followed by my name. Hi, my name, repeatedly. Roddy and I ended up calling the police, staying in my room until they came and took him back to his house. They said that he must have been on drugs, but probably wasn't a threat. I agreed. I didn't think he was a threat, but I didn't sleep well that night, knowing that he's just a thin wall away from us in his apartment. I talked to Kyle about a week later. He had no memory of doing this, but he did call 911 on himself and got an ambulance to the hospital the next morning because he had severe sunstroke. So, it was likely sunstroke-induced delirium. He's okay now, thankfully. So, the second story. We'd forgotten to lock our doors another time. I was at work and Roddy was at home. I got a text from him that said, "Please get home. Someone is here, and I think you must know them because I don't." So, I took an early lunch and I came home to see what was going on. There was a man with greasy black hair so long it nearly reached his elbows, and he was pacing back and forth in our living room. Before I even got a chance to speak to him, I realized he wasn't mentally present. He would alternate between screaming at the top of his lungs like he was being murdered, and then he would cry and say things like, "I can feel the pain and suffering of everyone in the world. I can hear the voices of the poor and tormented in my brain begging me to help them. I can't stand this suffering. Nobody understands my powers and ability to know what everyone is thinking." I would chime in politely to ask, "Do you know where you are?" Or, "What is your address? I can help you get home." And then he would just scream at us, because this was his house and he wasn't leaving, and he wanted us to stop, quote-unquote, judging him. After about 10 minutes of him rambling and pacing, he said his address to us, which is actually the neighboring apartment where Kyle lives. I knew Kyle had a roommate that I met, John, but apparently this was their third roommate. I went to his door and knocked, and thankfully the roommate, John, opened the door. He came to retrieve the rambling man. Later that night, John knocked on our door. I opened it to see him holding a bottle of wine. He wanted to thank us for handling the situation well, making sure that he got home. Apparently, the man had recently been in a mental hospital and left on his own accord, walked into the wrong apartment. His parents, they came and got him, and he's back in the hospital, safe and sound. A few years ago, my boyfriend and best friend of 4 years had just dumped me. I was using this website, Meet Me, to meet people in my area while I was in college. My profile clearly stated that I was not explicitly looking for anyone to date, just wanted to meet new people. I had just been dumped, so I was really trying to put myself out there, and I'm not really the type to go out. In my area, there's a giant dance-a-thon that my university puts on every year to raise money for a children's hospital. I had someone message me and ask if I'd heard of it. I told him that my dance team usually performed at it every year. He told me he was actually one of the children that was supported by the event when he was younger. I thought that was really cool, so I asked him a little about his experience with that and genuinely thought it was interesting. After a while, that conversation was kind of dead and I didn't really have much else to say. Plus, it was getting late and I kind of wanted to go to bed. I told him so, and after about 10 minutes of laying in my bed, trying to sleep, I got another notification. I glanced at it real fast, and this dude had honestly sent me a novel. After this event, I swiftly deleted the account, so unfortunately, I don't have access to the exact messages. So I'm going to do my best to remember. The first one went a little something like, "Look, I'll be honest. I really want to keep talking to you. In fact, I'd actually really like to take you out on a date sometime. You seem like a really nice girl and very sweet and interesting. I think we would get along extremely well. I'm kind of alone in this world." Insert long-winded commentary about his loneliness here. He also didn't use any punctuation, so it took me a long time to dissect this. I responded and told him I wasn't interested. He was about 7 years older than me. I was 20 at the time. I tried to say goodnight again. Then he responded with another novel, along the lines of, "I don't think you understand. You're perfect to me. You were made for me. I'm sure of it. God speaks to me, you know. God wants us to be together, and we will be. One day, you'll be mine." I'm trying to be polite because he was so nice earlier, and I guess I'm naive. I don't totally know, but I kept responding, trying to let him down easy. Some more highlights. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but God has decided this. Who are we to deny him of his plan? Someday in the future, we'll end up together. You'll realize it soon." And things like, "We're going to have 3 children. I know their names. 2 boys, 1 girl. God spoke their names to me. I wrote them down when I was 7 years old, and I still have that paper. Do you know how I know you're going to be my wife? Because I wrote your name down with it. You'll be my wife. Don't make a mistake. God is talking to me now. He's saying your name to me. I can't let you leave." At this point, I blocked and reported him, noped the hell off that site, and I went to bed all creeped out. Morning came, and he had found me on Facebook. And he was going on and on and on, starting with comments along the lines of, "Where did you go? How could you do this to me? You're denying our fate." He did it all night. I freaked out, told him to leave me alone pretty aggressively, and blocked him. I deleted all of the social media apps off of my phone for the next few days. I asked my roommates to stay at home with me. They agreed after I told them what happened. I was actually genuinely afraid that this dude was going to come and find me. I mean, he was local, and I had made nice conversation by telling him my major and some clubs that I was in. He could have showed up anywhere. But thankfully, he didn't, and that was the end of that.
My friend and I are both young females, small, petite build. We'd been drinking at a hotel and decided to walk to the main strip. About a 20-minute walk at around 9:45 p.m. We are laughing, listening to music, and just having plain fun at this point. Now this is when shit started to go south. Out of nowhere, a lady pops out in front of us. She obviously looks like she's on something. She's twitching, walking really funny, and she's on the phone. So my friend and I step around her, because she was initially going the opposite way to us. Then, all of a sudden, she walks past us, and while she's getting ahead of us, she's looking back and speaking into the phone. I, for some reason, was already feeling kind of uncomfortable, so my friend and I slowed down to let her stay in front of us. But we decided to go to the other side of the street, because why not? The lady sees this, speaks into the phone again, and crosses with us. I was trying to give her the benefit of the doubt, thinking maybe she's uncomfortable and feels unsafe, and she's trying to use us as cover. But my gut was telling me otherwise. So while she's walking in front of us, she's still frequently looking back and talking into the phone. So we cross the street again to put some distance between us. This time, the lady almost turns down a street, where a man wearing all black walks out in the same direction we were going. The lady stops at this cross street and just stares at us. Then she steps behind some kind of bush. The man went about 300 feet in front of us on the opposite side of the street, and then turned around and walked back to the same cross street the lady was at. We were still speed walking, so where they supposedly stepped off to was now out of sight. My friend was local to the town I was staying in, so she was already calling a friend who lived 2 blocks down to come and get us. Around this time, I look back and see both of them speed walking towards us. At this point, I'm trying to make it obvious that I noticed them by turning around, pointing and yelling. Luckily, when they were about 2 blocks away, her friend arrived and we sped off. I was once featured in a St. Jude Survivor newsletter when I was about 5 years old in the early 90s. The newsletter went out across the country and apparently into Canada. There was this guy named Mitchell that called my family up out of the blue because he had read my cancer survival story. He lived somewhere in Canada and claimed to be this big-time Christian and wanted to talk to me about God and prayer. My mom let him talk to me for whatever reason, and the guy actually just wanted to talk to me about ALF. This Canadian guy named Mitchell was obsessed with ALF and somehow got a hold of our mailing address and sent me tons of ALF merchandise. Coloring books, pencils, ALF everything. For some reason, my parents let him talk to me whenever he could call because they bought into his God stuff and liked how he sent me ALF stuff. This went on and off for about a year, until he asked me if I'd ever heard of John Wayne Gacy. He told me who he was and that he had escaped him when Gacy tried kidnapping him when he was a kid. He told me I should tell my parents they shouldn't trust strangers because you never know who you could really be talking to. I remember he didn't sound menacing when he said it, just matter of fact. Of course my parents freaked out when I told them that, and they changed numbers and called the police. They never really did anything since the guy lived in Canada by all accounts, and he hadn't really threatened me. Also, keep in mind Mitchell somehow had our mailing address and knew exactly where we lived. We had plans on moving soon anyway, though. Fast forward 10 years to about 2001. We live in a new house, a new state, everything unlisted. I'm now 15, and what did we get in the mail? Yes, you guessed it, a fucking ALF coloring book. This happened about 5 years ago when I was 14 and my sister was 18. My dad is an avid fisherman who loves fishing in the middle of nowhere simply because there aren't any other people around. For this particular fishing trip, we went to a state park in Georgia a couple of hours from where we lived. After about an hour down a mixture of a dirt and gravel road, we arrived at a pretty large clearing where we parked. We got out and walked down a hill to a small waterfall with a pool of water at the bottom. The river before the waterfall was very shallow. The details of the area are kind of important. When we arrived, we had lunch by the river and started fishing. We were there for an hour when I started to get bored and went back to the car that was parked nearby for water. On my way back to my dad, I noticed a man standing just behind the tree line of the clearing, about 30 feet from our car. Thinking it was weird, I hurried back to my dad and told him. By the time I told him, we all looked back and the guy was already standing above us on top of the hill. The man gave us all a very weird vibe from the start. He was in his late 20s and stood at about 6 foot. He wasn't an overly broad person, but he was far taller than my dad. He was dressed in an army uniform, although it honestly looked like a Halloween costume. The most noticeable part about him was the machete he was holding. My dad, remaining calm, started to strike up a conversation with him and asking him if he was fishing here too. The man just stared at us for about a minute before answering that he was waiting for his friends to come by in a boat so he could pick them all up. He had no car with him, no trailer, and he was at the base of a waterfall. Really good story there. My dad at this point was very concerned, even though he kept very calm. While chatting to the guy about the arbitrary things, he was slowly packing up all of our stuff and putting himself between the man and his children. The man didn't respond much, just standing there being very twitchy and restless. In about 20 minutes, my dad managed to move us slowly up the hill and back to our car. When we started making motions to leave, however, the man started getting aggressive. He suddenly started talking about his time in the military and how his high school sweetheart left him for another. His eyes got wild after mentioning his ex-girlfriend, and he turned his attention to my sister. He started yelling about how women were awful and would always be unworthy of a man's attention, all while leering at my sister and stabbing the ground repeatedly with his machete. At this point, my dad decided we needed to go and motioned for my sister and I to get in the car before he followed and locked the doors. We got out of there in a hurry as the guy watched us leave before going back into the trees. This guy's become a bit of a joke in our family, as we dubbed him Machete Man. But that experience will always stick with me. My dad admits that was the one time where he truly wished he had a gun, because his only weapon at the time was a pair of scissors.
Don't remember how old I was, just that I was small enough to fit in the front baby seat of a grocery cart. That would put us in the late, very late 90s, early 2000s. I was grocery shopping with my mom at a Costco. For those who don't know the chain, it's basically a huge warehouse where everything is sold in bulk, Food, clothes, books. It's basically a Walmart, but if Walmart sold cereal boxes in counts of threes or frozen dinners by the dozen. My mom has a habit of pulling her grocery cart down to one side of the aisle in stores and then walking the length of the shelves, picking what she wants, and then coming back to the cart and dumping what she has in the basket. I don't know why she does it, but hey, moms do weird things. So maybe 4 or 5, sitting in the front basket playing with my Game Boy Color, when she pulls over next to a fruit display in Costco and tells me that she's going to look at the different deals and to sit tight. I wasn't a very fidgety kid, so I said no problem. She'd gone for a couple of minutes. I'm absorbed in Pokemon, so I don't really notice her walk up until the cart starts moving. Being a kid, I instinctively trust she's the one pushing the cart. I was wrong. After a moment or two, I catch out of the corner of my vision her red nails. This is a problem because my mom never paints her nails and never, ever wears them long. I look up. The lady pushing the cart is a little older than my mother. Same curly black hair, but pulled into a ponytail at the nape of her neck. I still remember she had tanned Italian-type skin with thick red lips, a heavy coat of eyeliner, and brown eyes. She was pretty skinny. Her teeth were yellowed, and she smelled like what I didn't realize until later, bad BO. This wasn't my mom, and I said so very loudly. She laughed and looked around and pushed the cart a little faster. I said it again, and she looked me dead in the eyes and said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember the exact wording, "Oh, sweetie, what game are you playing? I am your mom." So, the way Costco is set up, at least ours, is that in the produce area, instead of aisles, they're more like islands. They're large square setups that you can see the entire length of the produce section if you walk in that area. So, of course, I can see my actual mother a few displays away. As loud as I could, I remember yelling, "Mom!" and watching her head whip around to look at me right as this lady is trying to cover my mouth with her hand. I don't know if she decided then I wasn't worth it because I was so noisy, or if looking at my mother charging from a few displays over. A side note, my mom is not a petite woman. She's built like a linebacker and played roller derby and softball throughout college, up until I was about 10. She's more of an ox than a human woman, but that's what I appreciate about her. But anyways, this woman squeezed her hand around my little face once and then booked it. My mom comes running up to me and starts asking me a million questions at once, and my little brain thinks all of a sudden that I'm in trouble for using my outdoor voice inside, because she looks mad. So I start to cry. By the time she calmed me down, the lady was already gone and reporting her to the head of security. Store never found her inside, and security cam footage showed her leaving, but never with anyone else. Don't know why she picked me, or what it would have been for, but I'm just glad my real mom ended up scaring her away, and that nothing became of it. I posted about this as a response to a question on r Ask Reddit, and decided to post it here. So this happened at my college years back. I went to a college that was integrated into a big city. So even though there was a campus, there were plenty of shops, back streets, public transport, and just regular people walking around. So I was part of a club that went late into the night. I usually only stayed till 9:30 p.m. and would then leave, usually with a friend. The club was in the center of campus while I lived east of it, so a 15 to 20 minute walk. This was a foggy late fall, early winter night. My friend had left early because they weren't feeling well. I ended up staying late and began my walk close to 10:30 p.m. So I started walking down a back street that was quiet but led right to my dorm. It was after a few minutes that I heard footsteps somewhere behind me. I stopped, thinking it was a jogger, and moved to the side to let them pass. But then I noticed that there was no one coming and the footsteps had stopped. I shrugged and started walking. Then the footsteps started up again. I stopped and it stopped. I started to get a bad gut feeling and quickly walked to a side street that connected the back street to a bigger main street. This street had a lot of lights, plenty of cars, and still a good number of people on it. I walked back to my dorm from there. Next morning, I woke up and checked my emails. One was from the campus alert system. Apparently, an hour after I got back to the dorm, someone was stabbed on the back streets. Victim was rushed to the hospital and survived, saying that the perpetrator followed them down the back street before stabbing them. Perpetrator never got caught, but I have no doubt that that was the person who tried to follow me. I'm so glad I trusted my gut. After that, I made sure to never stay at the club past 9:30 and to always leave with someone who was at least walking in the same direction as me.
I'm a moderately typical male teenager from Japan. Ever since I can remember, I have throughout my lifetime had reoccurring encounters with some strange people, be it in terms of looks or behavior. These encounters can happen anywhere from a week's space to several months, and it always seems like when I do, it was their intention to meet me. My most recent one was on my way home from school. During my walk, I was looking down at my phone for a short moment, about to text one of my friends I planned to have over at my house later. As I looked up, a young man looking like he was in his 20s was approaching me a few meters ahead. This confused me for a minute, as it was a straight and fairly long path ahead. I thought to myself that while I may have been looking at my phone, I would have surely noticed him coming from the corner of the path a good length away. Or at least I expected him to be closer to that corner. But there he was, approaching me from the middle as if he'd appeared from thin air. His hair was dark brown, a bit unkempt but still good-looking, and he had green eyes. His clothes were fairly ordinary too, keeping a sort of laid-back summer style to it. The most remarkable thing about him was his tattoo, or mark per se. A black line running from the left side of his chin and down underneath his shirt. As he got close enough for conversation, he stopped me and asked for my name. When I told him, he said that he'd heard about me before. This confused me, as I'm not exactly a celebrity, but I thought nothing more of it. We then had some boring small talk, but he genuinely seemed pretty cheerful. Just as he was about to take off, he told me that I should probably wait for my friend. He didn't give me much of a chance to respond to this before walking off in the direction he came from. I thought about what he said and turned around to walk back to school. I glanced behind my back not long after, only to find that he was nowhere to be seen. As I made it back to my school, I sure enough find my friend waiting by the gate. She apparently thought that we were going to walk back to my place together, and she'd been waiting there for me for quite a long time. I apologized and we began walking, and well, that's the end of it. I didn't tell her about the encounter, but I thought about it when she left. I didn't tell him or hint about my friend at all, so how would he have known? These types of encounters have kept on happening throughout my whole life, sometimes very frequently, and I don't know why. These people I meet just seem too unreal, and they usually know something I never told them about, which leads me to believe these people aren't human at all. I used to work for my dad, who was partially self-employed doing regular maintenance and floor refinishing for a childcare program called Head Start. The one center was in an old school, which was built not too long after the turn of the century, and served as a church functions building in addition to housing Head Start and another childcare. We always did floors over the summer. Anyone who has stripped and waxed floors knows that when you're putting the coat back on, it's quiet and relaxing. We were the only people in the building since it was a midsummer weekend, and yet it felt off. Even before we entered, like someone was watching from the second floor window. So here we are. We're making slow progress across this huge room when we hear something upstairs and stop. Then it sounded like someone was skipping across the room and back a few times, and then it stopped again. So we finished the layer and went upstairs. Mind you, the upstairs had a few classrooms with shelves filled with supplies from the classes. Nobody was up there. So we closed the door and went downstairs to start the other room. Once again, this sound started, but this time I sprinted upstairs. The sound stopped before I reached the hall, but all of the doors were open at various angles. We didn't hear the sound anymore that summer, but my dad asked the childcare advisor from the other end of the building if they heard any weird noises. She said no, but that one day they were sitting down for snacks and a couple of kids were staring in the corner. The aide asked them what they were looking at, and one of the kids asks, "Why can't that girl eat with us?" The aide looked around and then asked, "What girl?" And the kid points at the corner and says, "The little girl in the white dress." I haven't set foot in that building since, and I have no desire to do so. I used to think ghosts were for scary stories, but I have trouble believing this isn't real. This happened to a friend of mine. He was on a sheep farm in mid-February, staying in an old farmhouse which was situated in Tipperary in Ireland. He was being paid to keep an eye on the ewes while they lambed. It's in the middle of nowhere, and a long, long way from the nearest occupied neighboring farm. So as you do, he kept his shotgun and kept it close to his bed at night, and allowed his trusty sheepdog Rocky to sleep at his feet at the end of the bed. One night, he said it was 2 weeks into his watch, it happened. Being mid-February, it was cold as hell, and nothing's colder than an old farmhouse with zero insulation. So he had 2 whiskeys before laying down for the night. Before he went to sleep, he checked his gun and patted Rocky. In the middle of the night, he said it was close to 3 a.m. He was woken by a strange animal cry, one which scared him bolt upright. Then there was a massive explosion, and the window was burst out by a dark, shadowy figure. He got such a fright that he shat the bed there and then. Hugging the blankets to keep himself safe, he later realized that the cry outside was a stag calling for a mate. The explosion was caused by him knocking the shotgun over and it going off, and the window exploding out was Rocky, who was scared shitless of guns to start with. When it went off, the poor fucker jumped through the window. COVID was raging and there was a truck stop, the only one around for a long while. I stopped there and parked, needing to pee badly, but the actual truck stop was closed with no available restrooms, and I had no empty bottles or anything to pee in. So I was desperate and tried to find a secluded spot, and the best place I could find was in some bushes. Unfortunately, the spot would be visible to one trucker that was parked nearby, and I saw that he was awake in his cab in the daylight. So I thought it would be polite to approach him and say, "I'm sorry man, their restrooms are closed. I'm gonna go pee in the bushes right there. I wanted to let you know so I don't weird you out." He was an older guy and responded, "Nah man, you can just do it between my tractor and trailer and pee there on the ground. No one can see you." I chuckled and said, No thanks, sir, but if I'm gonna do that, I'll just do it in between my own tractor and trailer. And I started walking back to my truck. He called out, No, do it between my tractor and trailer. Something was really disturbing, though admittedly funny, about a guy insisting I pee between his truck and trailer.
A little backstory. So, I was a security guard for this local company in my area. I was assigned to a water park with another guard who was a regular there to keep watch. He was to train me and show me around and tell me what codes opened what doors. I first noticed how quick he was to enter and leave the property. He never wanted to spend more than 10 minutes inside the property before he would be eager to leave. Our first night was simple. There was nothing exciting or interesting going on, so our night dragged. After a few hours, I asked him if he'd experienced anything unusual while working here. He told me he'd had some problems with people trying to enter the property without permission, but that's about it. He also told me he hated working there because of his encounters with these people. He said they creeped him out because of how sneaky they were. He didn't really want to tell me much because he was afraid I would leave the post. That should have been a red flag for me, but I was too excited to let anything like that scare me. A few more hours later, and our shift is over, so we clock out and go home for the day. The next night, my boss called me to explain that the security guard, my partner, had resigned. I was a little upset because now I was working a two-man post all by myself with barely any knowledge on the place. Fast forward a few weeks. I started to get the hang of the place and created my own routine with no issues at all. No break-ins, no vandalism, nothing. It's now 2 a.m., and I was outside at the front of the property completing my rounds when I heard a door slam from inside. I jumped because of how loud it was. As I started to walk back into the property, I continued to hear doors opening and closing. I could feel myself getting nervous because it was the first situation I'd ever had at this place. As I walked inside and started to check the doors and complete a round to make sure there was no one on the property, I get to this corridor where there was a set of stairs that led down to a door that was wide open. I walked down the stairs to close and lock the door because I was too scared to take a look inside. As I turned around to head back up the stairs, I noticed a man dressed in all black standing at the top of the stairs. I took a step back and realized I'm cornered. If he was to try anything, I would have nowhere to run or hide. So I politely asked him if he needed any help. He didn't reply. I then asked him how he got into the property. He still didn't reply. He slowly turned his head and snapped his finger. Then, from the left side of the staircase, another man slowly crawled to his side like a dog on all fours. I then turned around and kicked the door open and ran inside and locked myself in a bathroom as I called my boss and told them what I witnessed. They sent an armed security guard to my position to complete a walkthrough to make sure I was safe. As I got the call that the area was clear, I came out and told them everything from start to finish. I realized that they didn't believe me, so I clocked out and went home for the night. The next morning, I received a call from my boss, explaining that they checked the security footage from the night before, and what they told me horrified me. Every hour, when I would complete my rounds inside the property, those same two men would follow me through the facility, as if they were stalking me. Like as if it was a game to them. After that, I asked for a new position because I was too horrified to work at that water park. I now know why my trainer didn't want to work there anymore. This actually happens to me. I have more creepy stories like this one from where I was working security, so please let me know if you want to read more. When I was a 17-year-old moody teenager, I had a big argument with my mom one night about how she just didn't understand my needs, and stormed out of the house. I was going to go for a walk, but it was freezing outside, and really dark, so I did a quick walk of shame past my mom and grabbed my car keys, giving her a quick explanation of going on a Macca's run before storming out yet again, giving the door a nice slam on my way out. I jumped in my terribly old and crappy bright red Suzuki Swift and cranked the heat, which made the engine scream in protest. I turned my angry teen music up and pulled out into the dark streets. I drove to McDonald's in about 10 minutes and decided I was too mad to eat, and to calm down, I would go on a nice drive. Just down the road another 15 minutes was a stretch of pitch-black, windy road that had lots of hairpin corners as it ran down a massive gorge to a small lake with a single-lane bridge going across. If that doesn't sound scary enough, the road was called the Galston Gorge. Fun fact, and you can Google this road, it's in Sydney, Australia. James Gibson's camera was found on this road. He was one of Ivan Milat's victims. The dude Wolf Creek was inspired by and one of Australia's worst serial killers, so it has a pretty creepy background, and therefore is completely deserted at night. As I was making my way down the gorge, which is a road I know very well, as I learned to drive on it with my mom, she took me a lot at night to learn night driving on a difficult road. I turned a hairpin corner, and as my headlights swung, and it lit up the road ahead, and I saw a black medium-shaped object in the middle of the road. It made me jump, but I assumed it was just a dead kangaroo. As I continued ahead, the closer I got to this object, I realized as I was almost on top of it that it was a baby car seat with the front covered in a blanket. I hit my brakes and my car screamed in protest even louder. I sat in my seat staring at this baby seat, clenching my steering wheel. No way I was getting out when it was probably just a broken and dumped booster seat. I was about to pull off when I heard a noise. I turned my music down, but the sound of my shitty car engine made it hard to locate or recognize the noise. I wound my window down an inch and listened. It was a fucking baby crying. No, crying is an understatement. This poor thing was screaming. I threw my seatbelt off and unlocked my door, grabbing the handle, then I froze. Out of the corner of my eye, in the bush, I thought I saw something move. It was just out of reach of the light from my headlights. I took my hand off the door slowly and sat back into my seat, thinking. I remember my mom telling me to never stop my car at night, that if I see something that requires help, then to move on and call for professional help, because there's nothing that requires the help of a moody, short little blonde girl who can barely carry her school bag. A baby needs my help. A tiny, defenseless baby. What if that was a wild animal I saw in the trees coming to have a meal on this little thing? I thought, before I opened my car door. As I did, my car let out a screech, causing whatever it was in the trees to jump. I slammed my door closed, jumping back in, and sped up the road. I got a few hairpins back up the gorge before pulling out my phone. Still no signal as I'm driving in a literal hole. I raced up to the top and back into busy streets, then called for police. I told them what I saw, and they told me to go home immediately, not to stop whatsoever, keep my doors locked, and they would call me tomorrow, but not to worry. The next morning, Hornsby police called me, thanking me for my report. They said a group of men have been placing baby seats in the middle of empty roads, covering them with a blanket, which hides a speaker playing the sound of children in distress to try and lure young women out of their cars. They then drag these women away and take advantage of them and beat them. Then, driving away in the woman's car, leaving their victim to die in the bushes. They checked out the gorge, but the people had left. They left in such a rush they forgot the blue baby blanket with little gray elephants on it that I had described to the police as the one covering the baby seat. They said I was clever to keep going and to never get out of my car late at night, no matter what's trying to stop me.
This happened 4 years ago after a concert. And yes, full disclosure, I'm a total moron. I lived in a really sketchy town, and the venue was in a moderately safe part of my town. bordering on the less than ideal parts. I'd like to note that this happened around 11 p.m., and so all the public transit was out of service for the night. We also did not drive downtown. I was with my boyfriend at the time, Marvin. Neither of us really wanted to download the Uber app, so he decided he wanted to call a taxi for some ungodly reason. I was tired and didn't question him. I remember him explicitly telling the guy on the phone we wanted to pay with card, so they said it would be about 15 to 20 minutes for them to arrive. We waited about a half hour, and then a taxi with the same logo of the company we called shows up. Marvin asks if the driver is ours, and he says, "Yeah, get in," and we followed suit. We explained to him that we're only able to pay with card because neither of us carry cash. The driver seemed pissed off and told us he'd drive us to an ATM. We explained that we talked to the company over the phone and told them we'd only be paying with card. He told us it was too late because the meter was already running and he wouldn't let us out. I started freaking out, especially when he drove the opposite direction he was supposed to. I kindly let him know he was going the wrong way, since he seemed to have no idea where he was going. He kept asking me where I lived and what exit he should get off of, and when I offered to route him, he got angry and ignored me. I tried to get his information, but he didn't have his taxi license on display like he was supposed to. I was too afraid to talk back to this guy because he had such a brash demeanor, so I sent my location to my friends and told them what was going on and took a photo of the driver when he wasn't paying attention. Before you say anything, I know I'm an idiot, especially since I have a lot of experience living in the city and taking taxis. Anyway, we finally arrived to my apartment in one piece, but the meter was almost at $30 at this point, so he demands we go to an ATM, even though I wasn't sure if my campus had one, and my boyfriend decided to go look for some reason, so I was left with this asshole taxi driver. So, I was just playing on my phone trying to ignore my gnawing anxiety attack. I asked if he'd roll down the window, and he says, no. The doors were also locked inside, and when he moved up to another parking place, I almost knocked his ass out and ran away, thinking he was trying to kidnap me. But of course, this only gets worse. He starts by asking me pretty general questions, and actually isn't an asshole for once. He asks how long I've been in school, what I study, you know, the usual stuff. Then he asks if my boyfriend and I live together. I laugh and just answer, no, since he didn't even live in the same city as me. He asks me if I want to marry my boyfriend, to which I give him a gentle no. Then he started asking if we were having sex before marriage, and I straight up wanted to kill this guy. He proceeded to ask me if I had any experience and how many boyfriends I've had, and he tells me I'm very pretty, along with other highly suggestive questions. Finally, Marvin comes back with money. The fare is almost up to $40, and my boyfriend just gives him two 20s. The driver finally lets me out, but then has the audacity to demand a tip. And of course, my ever so classy ex says, "Here's your tip, you greedy bastard," and flips him off, and proceeds to cuss him out while I'm literally having a full-blown panic attack. We're both fairly certain that he would have robbed us if we had cash. Also, as a note, we called the taxi place and asked what happened. They said our driver reported that we never showed up. He ended up sitting outside my building for 2 hours, while I was literally freaking out. I'm just glad I live in a high-security apartment building. Something weird just happened to my wife and I. We live in an apartment with a neighbor next to us and below us. We were watching TV, and all of a sudden, we heard what sounded like someone vomiting. We thought it was a neighbor because unfortunately our walls are kind of thin, and we've heard them cough or throwing up before. However, this time it went on for almost 10 minutes. So we paused our show, and my wife went into the kitchen to see if she could hear better as to what was going on. All of a sudden, she runs back into the living room and says she just saw a black shadow move in front of her. And at that moment, the vomiting sound stopped, and we haven't heard it since. We've never had any weird experiences like this happen to us, so this was very odd, and now we're kind of freaked out. I worked as a camp counselor for a few summers and had a great signature ghost story. I don't really remember too many of the details, but the gist was that there was some ghost who would kill you unless you gave him 2 of your teeth and told him 2 other names of people to kill. It was a fine story, but the real kicker came at the end of the night. When all my baby teeth had been replaced with adult teeth, 2 of them never came in and were missing. For a few years, I had a retainer with 2 fake teeth to fill in the gaps. Before sending the kids off to bed, I would pop the retainer out in secret and give them a big old toothy smile. It scared the bejesus out of the little buggers every time. A few years ago, I was hiking the southern portion of the Pacific Crest Trail in Washington State, USA. It was late June, so warm enough that water sources were valuable. I made camp toward the end of the day in a mildly used site. It was a few feet off the trail, but not deep into the woods. A babbling brook was about 50 feet away. As I was heating water on my tiny stove for dinner, an older man walked down the trail. He saw me and hollered to ask if I had any water. I noticed that he was wearing regular clothes, jeans, sneakers, and a casual white button-down shirt. No pack. It was all odd. I was far enough down the trail, maybe 10 miles, from any road, that a day hiker would have been extremely rare at that point. I welcomed him into my camp and gave him water from a jug. He drank it, thanked me, then walked on. I thought it was odd, and it stuck in my mind. The following week, I came off the trail to a nearby town and learned of a massive manhunt for a guy in his 60s, wearing jeans, sneakers, and a casual white button-down shirt. He had abandoned his car near the PCT and was on the run from feds for money laundering and other white-collar crimes. I never did learn if they found him. I often wonder how far he got with no gear, no food, and no water. A small part of me hopes he got away.
This is actually 2 stories in one. The main story happened less than 20 minutes ago at about midnight. I was out doing some late night fishing at a small but deep hole on the side of a state road near my house. Every time I fish here at night by myself, I worry about what would happen and what I would do if somebody were to pull over next to me, but it has never happened, until now. Quick detour for the second story. I wasn't always like this. I used to fish by myself, in the middle of the night, all the time, and without a care in the world. But there was one night about 10 years ago, which perhaps merits its own post, but I will slide it in here and include it in the story anyway. Where I was fishing off a seawall next to a bridge, a car pulls over next to me. 2 young men, but older than I was at the time, got out. They walked up to me casually and they asked me if I was catching anything. I told them no, not really. I wasn't at all suspicious of them. I thought they were going to fish and just thought they would ask if I was having any luck or not before pulling out their gear. The bridge was a popular fishing spot. I was sitting on the cement seawall with my feet dangling over the edge. One of the men suddenly shoves me off the seawall into the water. They both grab my fishing gear and take off in their car. The fall was only about 7 feet or so, complete guess, but it was enough that I couldn't lift myself out of the water and up to the cement wall. I had to swim around to where the water was more shallow so that I could climb up the wall. My mom had dropped me off that night, and I was supposed to call her to come pick me up later that night. My cell phone had gotten wet, and it wouldn't work. To make matters worse, I was a smoker at the time. I'm now going on 2 years without smoking or any other form of nicotine. Yay. And my cigarettes had also gotten wet. And as you can imagine, I really needed a cigarette. I didn't know what to do except just sit there until eventually my mom drove up randomly. She was furious. Until, of course, I explained what happened. I shudder when I think about how I, or anybody else that they did this to, could have easily have died. These people had no idea whether or not I knew how to swim. I was, and am a very strong swimmer, and apparently they did not care. If they had seen on the news the next day that I drowned under that bridge, would they have put 2 and 2 together? Would they even care? Even if you assume everybody is a strong swimmer, the person could hit their head. There were many rocks under that seawall, and they can be unconscious. And for what? $50 of cheap fishing gear? Anyway, clearly ever since this night, 10-ish years ago, I've been so much more cautious when I'm alone at night. So back to what actually happened tonight, which ended up making me write this story to begin with. I had, luckily, just finished up and loaded my car back up with all of my gear. I was actually sitting in my car and making an Instagram post showing off the fish I caught. A couple of yellow bullhead catfish and some bluegill. I was trying to quickly write the post and then head home, so I was deep in the world of my phone, not really paying attention to anything else. Something causes me to look up and out my driver's side window. There is this pickup truck sitting there that I didn't even hear pull up to me. It has one of those big steel frame structures around the bed of the truck. I don't know what they're called, but I associate them with hunters or trappers. I have no idea whatsoever if that's an accurate association or not. I do feel like I've seen them, or something similar, holding kennels with hunting dogs, so maybe that is where I got the idea. There is this very stereotypically chubby redneck mullet type of guy. He's looking in my window at me, smiling, a creepy smile. He was the passenger. I could not look past him to the driver. I have no idea how long they were sitting there. I very quickly debated winding my window down and asking what they want, but settled on putting my car into drive, driving around their truck and down the street. I was so freaked out that I didn't immediately go home. I went somewhere else and pulled over, looked around to see if they were anywhere to be seen, and then I actually went back to the fishing spot to see if they were still sitting there or not. I didn't pull over. I just drove by. They were not there. It will drive me crazy wondering why they pulled over. Did they have something bad planned? Were they just curious? Wanted to help? Will I have to worry about seeing them around town after driving off on them like that? I realize that my reaction is not completely fair. They could have been pulling over to fish, although you've got to realize how small this fishing hole is. It is a literal fishing hole on the side of a road. It's probably about the size of a dining room or something. They could have been pulling over to see if I needed help, but who knows? All I know is that I was thinking that if I wind the window down to find out what they want, I could have ended up with a gun in my face, for all I know. Then I could have not had any chance to drive off. So I drove off without acknowledging them in any way, so that I didn't miss my chance. Even now, I worry about the fact that my car has some slightly identifying marks. Nothing crazy or noticeable, but just some small stickers in the window. And if I piss them off by driving off like that, and they live around here, what if my wife meets up with them sometime? What if she has my daughter with her? Am I paranoid? I'm still a little freaked out. I remembered this event after reading a similar creepy story on here, and I thought I'd go ahead and post it. I went to school with this guy. We never dated or anything like that, just friends, but not overly close. I didn't see him for a few years after we got out of school, but we ran into each other when I was pregnant with my son. We hugged, talked for a while, and then we went our separate ways. Several years later, I was watching the evening news and I heard them say a familiar name. I immediately recognized the name of my old friend since it was fairly unusual. They said he was arrested for killing his girlfriend. He apparently stalked her, but was able to get her to come to his apartment to get her belongings. He then abducted and shot her. He drove around with her body in the car for a whole 4 days. I don't mean that the body was in the trunk either. Her body was in the passenger seat, and he would talk to her and take her places, such as visiting his father's grave. I was able to find the article from 1991 in the newspaper. However, I'm not sure if that's appropriate to post here. If it is, I can post it in the comments if I can figure out how.
So when I was about 7 years old, I was getting ready for school and going through my basic routine. The routine I had was getting up and dressed, go downstairs and make a cup of tea, make breakfast, and then when my older brother got downstairs, I'd say good morning to him. This morning was just like usual. It was a sunny day and I was doing my routine, but I'd been a bit slower than usual. I was making breakfast and had heard someone rushing down the stairs and thought my brother was coming down. So I stopped making my breakfast and looked to the hallway door to say good morning. But upon looking, I didn't see my brother. Instead, I saw myself. The other me stopped and stared at me without saying anything. The other me looked petrified. We stood there for a few seconds staring at each other. And then the other me ran off into the bathroom, which was right next to the doorway. I hesitantly walked over to see the bathroom door was shut. I opened it slowly and looked in, but the other me wasn't there. I looked behind the door, but there was no one there. I was so scared I ran upstairs and bumped into my brother and broke down into tears. No one believes me that this happened. Has anyone got any answers? This was around 2 years ago. I just dropped off my friend, so I decided to stop at the gas station down the street to get a slushie. It was the middle of the day at around 1 p.m., and the gas station was pretty empty, so I parked in the middle of the pumps. While I'm inside browsing snacks, I noticed a group of 5 guys or so walk in, and they're all looking at me hard. I write it off and just assumed they're checking me out or whatever, but I felt weird. So I grabbed my stuff and checked out. As soon as I walked out the door, I looked towards my car and realized that the group of guys had parked me in. 1 car in front of me, 1 car behind. Both parked really close to me to prevent me from pulling out. I saw that there was a guy waiting in the car behind me, watching me. I knew I had to get the hell out of there, so I sped walked to my car, got in, and instantly locked the door. I turned my wheel and backed up as much as I could towards the pump, then sped out of there. While I was maneuvering my car out, I saw the guy watching me get out his phone, and it looked like he was yelling. I made sure they weren't following and went home. I don't know what they wanted from me, and I didn't want to find out. I ended up hearing a similar story from another girl in my city, but she had banged her car up when she tried to get away. This happened about 5 years ago when I was attending college in a small rural town. I was 21 at the time, and I lived in a duplex with 2 roommates in a neighborhood. We had 2 houses on either side of us. We never really saw our neighbors much or talked to them until it was maybe 3 to 4 a.m. I was just getting home from my boyfriend's house. I pull into the driveway and start walking up to my door when I hear, "Help me. Please help me." At first, I was so startled that I bolted towards my door, but then I realized someone might actually need help. So I slowly walked back out front and noticed an older woman laying in my neighbor's yard. She calls out to me again, "Please help me. I think I broke my hip. I fell off the porch." I walk over to her and ask if I can call an ambulance. She says, "No. Can you please go inside and get Dr. Jones?" So I walk inside the house and start calling out for Dr. Jones. While inside, I notice an open bedroom door with a light on and a mattress on the floor. I assumed it to be the woman's room. I walk further back into the house, calling out for Dr. Jones, and eventually he comes out of a back bedroom. He looks just as startled as I was. I tell him the situation, and he follows me outside and helps her up. They thank me, and I go back inside my house. The rest of the time I lived there, I never saw them again. It's still one of the weirdest things that has happened to me. I was once at a casino with my friend in northern Minnesota. I'm not a frequent traveler, and surprisingly never been to Canada, even though it's only 3 to 4 hours away. On this particular night, a woman came up to me and my buddy and says, "You guys were on TV, I saw you." And us being a few drinks in, laugh and agree, even though we had no knowledge of being on television. Moments later, we see the woman frantically yelling to a security guard that we were wanted in Canada for murder, and that she was certain it was us. The security knew us from frequently visiting this particular casino and laughed it off and came and told us the story. My buddy's girlfriend decided for shits and giggles to look up Canada murders, and sure as shit, it was all over the Canadian news. 2 males, who looked like the exact mirror images of the 2 of us, were wanted for recent murders. We all laughed and thanked God for our crippling gambling addiction, because had the security guard not known us, the situation could have played out much differently.
This happened a few days ago, while I was on my way home from visiting my friend's house. I was driving on a back road late at night in my Tesla Model 3 while it was on auto drive. I'll admit that I was not paying attention to the road, and I was on my phone while I had music playing in the car. The ride was okay and chill for a while, but I'm not really sure because I was not paying attention to the time. Out of nowhere, my car immediately braked and made an alarming sound. I was scared shitless and immediately took control of the wheel and looked through the windshield. When I looked, I saw a figure standing inches from my car, barely avoiding being hit. My heart was racing from impact and now seeing what I could only assume to be a person. They didn't even flinch from the sight of almost being hit. I looked at them for a good 10 seconds before I put my car in park and turned on the megaphone to ask them if they were okay. They didn't respond and proceeded to walk near my window. I locked my doors while they were approaching because I was terrified. They asked me if I could roll down the window to speak to them, but I refused and told them that I could hear them from the other side. I then asked why they were out there all alone in the cold, and they told me that their car had broken down and that they were hoping someone would stop to help them. As they were talking, I got a good look at their face, and they appeared to be 25 to 30 years old. They also asked me my name, and I told them my name was Rebecca, and they told me their name was Ashton. After that small talk they attempted, I told them that I would be calling someone to come assist them with their situation. They weren't happy with that and insisted that I drop them off to a friend's house who lived nearby. That's when I became really freaked out and suspicious. They had told me that they were waiting for someone, and now they needed me to drop them off. I then put my car back into drive and told them again that I would be calling someone to come help them. They then tried to reach for the door handle, but I guess they forgot that Tesla handles are embedded into the car. When they did that, I immediately stepped on the pedal and went flying down the road. I didn't even look into my rearview mirror and put the car back into autopilot. The whole ride back, I was scared shitless. I got back onto the main road where I would hope to see cars and just floored it home. I couldn't get my mind off of it for the rest of the night. I have suspicions that guy was not alone and that there was other people with him. I pray that they didn't get someone else who wasn't as lucky as me. I will never in my life stop to help some random person ever again. I'm a single male who lives in Denver. My apartment complex is not what you would call a nice building. I'm on a road close to Colfax Avenue, which, if you're familiar with the geography of this area, is not the safest boulevard in town. I'm a few streets away from it, but close enough that I wouldn't consider this an up-and-coming neighborhood. This evening, I was watching Netflix on my couch. My 2 cats were cuddled up against me as I lay under a comforter. The night before, I had watched a horror movie that was scary enough to leave me in an unsettling mood, making it harder to sleep. So this night, I decided to watch a stand-up special instead, keeping it light so I wouldn't have any trouble getting some shut-eye. I have classes early next morning, so I was surprised when I made the conscious decision to turn on a second stand-up special and let myself fall asleep on the couch. I was just so comfy where I lay and didn't want to move, not even to turn off the several lights that were on throughout my apartment. I remember dozing off around 11 o'clock. It was effortless, which meant I was really snug under the covers with my cats flanking me on either end, creating a tucked-in feeling. I fell into a dream where I was on an impromptu date with this guy, whom I didn't recognize, at a Blockbuster video store. He bought me blue and yellow underwear, insinuating I would take the hint of his intentions. He was also desperate for a job, so when we got to the counter, he was given an off-the-cuff interview that didn't go well, and all of a sudden, I'm not sleeping anymore. I'm woken up by a knock at my door. Then, a man's voice says, "Maintenance." I just sat there, sitting bolt upright on my couch. I knew something was off. I looked at my phone, which was by my left hand, and the time was 2:15 a.m. I didn't move. The floors of my apartment are old wood, and there are many creaky floorboards. I didn't want whoever was knocking to know someone was at home and awake, let alone alert to his presence. My cats got up and ran over to the door as they normally would, but I stayed still and listened. After a few minutes with no answer, the man walked away from the door and down the hallway to the stairs. A moment after that, I heard the back door to the building swing open and closed. I have one window where I have partial view of that door, so I break my paralysis and race over to it. I saw an old-looking green SUV sitting in the no parking zone just in front of the back door. It must have been running the entire time because I didn't hear it start up and the brake lights were glowing red. Someone, presumably the maintenance man, got in the car and it drove off. I don't know what his intentions were, but no one knocks on someone's door at 2:15 a.m. claiming to work for the landlord with good deeds in mind. Had it been a true emergency, wouldn't he have knocked again? Used his service key to get into the unit? What did I just avoid here? I can only assume it was an attempted robbery at best, or abduction at worst. When I was watching the SUV drive off, I surveyed the other apartment windows. They were all dark. I can see every unit except the 2 other corner apartments below me from that vantage point. I think because my apartment sticks out from the building and has many windows, I was targeted because my lights were visibly on and noticeable from the street. However, I don't know how this individual got into the building in the first place, as you would need a key to do so. I have never been so legitimately afraid as a single person living alone. I'm grateful I installed a security chain on my door when I moved in. I'm also so glad that even in my disoriented state, I had the presence of mind not to move from my couch or make any noise. As I recount this event, I can't stop my eyes from leaking tears, though I wouldn't call it crying. My nerves are definitely shot. I don't think I'll be going back to dreamland anytime soon. I've turned off all of the lights, except for the lamp by my bed. I usually can't sleep with it on, but tonight, I don't think I could sleep with it off.
When I was 16, my friend had told me one of her boyfriends liked me. I asked which one, and she said Austin. I said that I would be okay with her giving him my number. She did, and a week later, he became my boyfriend. There was nothing out of the ordinary at first. He seemed like a nice guy, and I felt like I could trust him. Fast forward to a week later. I was at his house, and he wanted to make out with me. I said no because we were in the middle of a video game. He got mad at me and started to have a meltdown. He dragged me upstairs by my hair and I couldn't fight him. Once upstairs, he began to abuse me. I was scared and didn't know what to do. I kept getting abused for a year and a half because I was too scared to leave. Finally, I did, and then I found out some pretty weird stuff about him. I'd heard from a friend of his back from his hometown that he'd planted a bomb in his school and then tried to light himself on fire. Plus, he's been institutionalized more than once. Okay, major red flags, and I wish I would have known a lot sooner. I graduated high school early, at the age of 17, and then moved out of town and started going to college. I had Austin blocked from everything: phone, Facebook, Twitter, basically any social media site. I blocked him if he was on it. Not even a month into college, I kept getting these calls and texts from numbers I didn't know. It was him. I had to constantly block numbers. I was getting tired of it, so I answered one. He was asking me which dorm I lived in because he was on campus and wanted to see me. I threatened to get security and the police if he did not leave. He hung up. I'd gone home that weekend, and then there was a knock on the door. I answer it, and it was him. He was holding a coffee cup and smiling at me. He tried handing me the coffee and told me it was my favorite kind. He was right. It was a regular order at the local coffee shop. I asked him how he knew that, and he confessed that he'd been watching me when I go there. I quickly shut the door and called the police and told him that's what I was doing. He left, but when I went back outside, the coffee cup was next to my car. The thing is, I don't know how he got my address. None of my friends ever gave it to him, and I sure as hell didn't. Fast forward to right before my 18th birthday. I was in the musical at my college, and I'd been advertising it on my Facebook, so friends and family knew when it was. After our Saturday show, I'd gotten a text from an unknown number that said, "Thanks for making me laugh. You did really good tonight. From A." I lost it. I showed one of the girls in the show with me, and she got security to walk me back to my dorm. A few weeks later, I found out that he'd bought me birthday presents and wanted me to come get them from his house. I told him no, and he kept bothering me about it. Yet again, he ended up showing up at my house when I was home. It was about 11:30 at night, and I heard a tapping noise at the window. I thought it was the wind making a branch hit the window, so I thought nothing of it. Probably about 10 minutes later, I heard whispering outside. I opened my blinds and he was standing there. I froze and shut the blinds. I called the police again, and when I got off the phone, went back to the window and told him the police were coming and that if I ever saw him again, I would get a restraining order. To this day, that was the last time I saw him.
Something strange has been happening. Recently, at around 3 a.m., I can hear the sound of my letterbox being opened. It sounds like it's popping open. It's quite a loud sound. There's no sound of it closing. It just seems to stay open. Then when I try to get back to sleep or forget about it, I hear it snap shut. On the inside of my apartment, there is a cage around the letterbox to catch any newspapers and magazines from hitting the ground. I go over and check later to see if anything has been posted, and nothing ever has. This has been going on for a little while now. I told one of my friends about it online. They thought it was weird, but I didn't want to pursue it. Even if someone was opening my mail slot, they probably wouldn't be able to look inside of my apartment due to that newspaper cage thing. I forgot the correct name, but I have one of those intercoms in my apartment. When someone rings the bell, a live video feed appears on the monitor so I can see who's out there. I could press that button at any time to see a live feed outside. It doesn't happen every night, but sometimes I forget about it. I'm a bit of a chicken. So the idea of looking at that live stream when that letterbox sound happens is a bit too scary. But I knew I would have to at some point. And that's where I made my first mistake. I was up late as usual, watching videos online, and I heard the sound of the letterbox pop open. Ah, you're back, I thought as I crept over to the door. I hit the live feed button. The video display was very narrow. You would only be able to see if someone was stood directly in front of it. I don't think I would be able to see if someone was crouching down. So with that in mind, I half expected to see nothing when I flicked on the monitor. But I was wrong. Someone was out there. A finger was stretched up towards the camera. It appeared to be attempting to rub or scratch the lens. What the hell is that? I got goosebumps. It was really eerie to see that at that time of night. For a moment, I doubted if this was actually happening. I looked over towards the door to make sure it was locked, and then I went back to the monitor. The hand and fingers continued to gently caress the lens. I watched the continuous motion. It seemed to be endless. I thought the owner of that hand would get tired. I couldn't look at it. I had to keep looking away and then back to him. The monitor is on a timer, and when it turns off, it makes a loud beeping noise. It's pretty loud during the day, but even louder at nighttime when it's quiet. If I didn't hold down the monitor button, then it would do an auto shut-off within 1 minute. I was so nervous and creeped out. I made a mistake. Due to the sweat on my finger, I slipped and lost pressure on the button. I heard a loud beep sound. Then, about 3 seconds later, my doorbell starts ringing like crazy. When someone rings the doorbell, the monitor automatically turns on, like those Ring doorbells. When the doorbell came on, all I could see were the fingers covering the lens. I was utterly terrified at this point. It wasn't normal. I watched the monitor as I saw a hand continuously press on the doorbell. I don't know how long this went on for, but I couldn't take it anymore. I approached the door. My bathroom is close to the front door, so for some reason I decided to position myself half in and out of the bathroom. From there, I shouted that I was going to call the police, and a response came.
Huh? Why?
It was the voice of a woman. Her voice was high-pitched and quite innocent sounding. That voice terrified me. Way more than any male voice. To hear a sweet and innocent voice so late at night was really unnerving. I guess that could be due to the influence of horror films. I shouted again and I told her I was calling the police, and she replied,
Oh really? Are you calling them?
What the hell was going on? The doorbell fell silent, and so did the mysterious woman out there. There was nothing but silence out in the hall. I was shaking. I felt as if something else was about to happen. The fear of anticipation had me. I expected to hear the doorbell or knocking, but I heard something else. I heard a familiar sound, the sound of the letterbox slot flipping open. I couldn't move at first, but then I went back to the monitor. I wanted to see why this person was always messing with the letterbox. I hit the button, but I couldn't see her out there. I guessed that it was all over. They must have taken my threat of calling the police seriously. I thought I'd be fine, but I couldn't get to sleep that night. I waited for the light of the morning to illuminate my apartment. I got ready for work. Once ready, I went to leave, but I noticed something in the letterbox cage. There were long strands of jet black hair all bundled up there. There wasn't a small amount of hair. There were thick clumps of it. It was as if someone shaved their head and posted it through my door. I've never seen anything that creepy in my life. I didn't know what to do. I had to go to work, so I guess I would just have to leave it there until I got home. That would give me some time to think about my next steps too. I didn't want to go home that day. I just kept thinking about the night before and all that hair. With that in mind, I decided to go to a bar with a coworker. That was a nice distraction, but as the night grew later and darker, I started to get more worried about returning to my apartment. The noise of the letterbox opening didn't happen every night, so I told myself I'd probably be alright if I went home, but the image of all that hair disturbed me too deeply. I asked to stay at my colleague's house. He let me, and I had a sound night of sleep. In the morning, I heard him shriek. I went to find him, and he was stood by the door. He had a newspaper open in his hands, and I was already worried about what I was about to see. I had a bad feeling in my stomach. There was hair in the newspaper. Shorter hair, if you know what I mean. It was as if it had been sprinkled amongst the pages. I felt like there was no escape. She must have been watching me. I was horrified. I still didn't understand what the hair was supposed to mean. We threw away the newspaper and the hair and headed off to work. I kept looking behind me. I was growing increasingly paranoid. I was worried that someone was following me. I couldn't stop looking over my shoulder. I didn't see anyone following me or watching me. I didn't want to go home after work, but I knew that I needed to. I couldn't wear the same clothes for a third day. I pleaded with my colleague to come with me, but he said he wouldn't because he was scared by my experience and didn't want anything to do with it. I decided to call my parents as I approached my apartment. I couldn't see anyone hanging around the building or near my door. I got into my apartment and quickly locked the door and shut the curtains. I then went about checking everywhere, under the bed, in the shower, anywhere I thought a person might hide, but there was no one there. I pulled a chair into the corner of the lounge and turned on the TV and just sat there. Nothing happened that night. Before I left for work in the morning, I checked the mail cage. New things were in there. Dead cockroaches in an empty can of tuna. It was a mess. I hate cockroaches. They really creep me out. Once I got rid of all the weird stuff in the mail cage, I heard the sound of what I thought was a kick at the door. I hated it. I waited a few moments, looked out there, and the coast was clear. And that's all that happened that day, thankfully. Enough was enough, though. It was time to go to the police. The officer said the following. If it's a man versus a woman, what have you got to worry about? What's the danger? Just lock the door and come back when something actually happens. I hated that officer. He can fuck off. Later that night, while I was alone at home, I heard a familiar sound. I knew it was the sound of the letterbox opening. I braced myself. I heard some other weird noise accompany it, like something was being pushed through the letterbox. I wondered what the hell was being fed in. I was shaking as I approached the door. A pill, like medicine, was dropped through the mail slot. It started bouncing and scattering on the hardwood floor. I hit the button and activated the monitor. She was there. A woman was there. She slowly rose to face the camera, and she opened her mouth wide. She made this crazy, slow, exaggerated motion. She placed a pill on her tongue, then closed her mouth. While smiling, she rolled the pill around in her mouth, and then she would open her mouth, stick out her tongue, and then again pluck the pill from her tongue. She bent down, and I heard the sound of the pill that had just been in her mouth bounce and skitter along my floor. She then popped back up to the monitor to repeat the process. It was so gross. I shouted at her to stop. I just hoped and prayed that she would leave me alone. After a few more pills posted, it looked like she was slowing, perhaps even stopping. She did, but then she started doing something different. She stood there directly in front of the camera and slowly moved her head from side to side, as if to indicate no. She did this about 6 or 7 times. And then she left, and that was it for the night. The next night, the doorbell rang out at about 3 a.m. again. This time she spoke. "Excuse me, could you watch my luggage whilst I'm away? I'll be back, just please keep an eye on it." This time she was wearing a hat. I knew it was her. I could tell by the voice and the way her messy hair was poking out from under the hat. I chose not to answer. I'll just leave this here then. Okay, hi everyone, it's Jay here. I just want to say, this next part gets more and more disturbing. So if that's something you want to opt out of now, it's your last chance. I wanted to know what she was planning on leaving outside my apartment, so I hit the monitor. Even though the footage was grainy, I could see that there was a cat out there. She held it up to the lens. It was already dead. I won't say much about this incident, but in the morning, before I headed to work, I cleaned it up and I buried the poor creature. That was the point where tears actually came to my eyes. I literally felt helpless. I felt as if my sanity was slipping too, due to the lack of sleep and incessant visits from that woman. Cockroaches and now a cat. I dread to think what was going to be next. With that in mind, I went back to the police. I really hate them. They didn't take me seriously at all. I swear they won't do a thing unless someone has been killed. I think they were already laughing before I left the station. When I got home that night, I noticed something. There was a big red circle on the door. Written in the middle of the circle was my name. I don't know what the hell that was supposed to mean, but it creeped me out. I looked around the hall to make sure the coast was clear, and then I headed into my apartment and quickly locked the door. Something was wrong. There was something in the mail cage again. An animal leg. I called the police. They actually came this time. "Oh, that's pretty unusual," the officer said. I felt like screaming at him, but I had no energy. He assured me that he would increase the number of patrols in the area. The following day was a scheduled day off for me, so I got up early and went to my rental company. I wanted out of that apartment. I told them that I would do anything to get out of there. Then a day or two after meeting with that real estate agent, the woman stopped coming to my apartment. I wondered if the woman had become as tired as I was with all of it. A few more days went by and my confidence was slowly returning. I headed home one night after work, and when I grabbed the door handle, I felt a strange sensation on my palm. It tingled. I looked at the door handle, and there was hair there. It was almost as if it was tied on like a ribbon. I shuddered. I wanted to go in as soon as possible. I put my key in the door, twisted the handle, but the door didn't budge. I stood there confused. I twisted the door handle again, and I still couldn't get in. What the hell was going on now? I wondered. I stood there for a moment, not knowing why it didn't open. Then it dawned on me. The door was already unlocked, and I was just locking it. Did I forget to lock the door when I left? Maybe all the lack of sleep and, unfortunately, excessive alcohol made me a bit too careless. I should have just left it and not gone into my apartment, but for some reason I did. I walked right in. The first thing I noticed was the sound of water. Not the continuous sound of flowing water, but the sound of like a faucet or a tap dripping. It echoed through my silent apartment. I hit the lights in the hall. No one was there. I walked around with my phone in hand. I noticed that there was a boxed lunch sat on the kitchen table. It was a bento lunch. I took a closer look at it, and there were dead cockroaches and wads of hair mashed into the food. There was more. I noticed that the fridge was open. I looked in. I was incredibly nervous. There were 3 plastic bottles full of reddish liquid. I called the cops and got out of my apartment. They came right away. I guess that was because of what they saw last time. According to the police, the bottles were filled with blood and water. The blood came from 2 different individuals. They told me to go somewhere safe and to give them some time to search the apartment. After about an hour, an officer called me, and he sounded pretty nervous. They found something in the bedroom. They said that there was a huge amount of thumbtacks hidden under my sheets. They were beneath the fabric of the pillows too. He said there were hundreds of them. On the balcony, each one of my clothes pegs had the same weird hair ribbon that I found on my door handle tied onto them. And also they discovered a pair of women's underwear hung up on the washing line. They said that underwear was soiled. They said it was far too dangerous for me to stay in my apartment that night, and they advised me to stay with a friend or a relative. My parents' house was too far away to get there that night. I don't have a license and the last train had already left. So I decided, well, maybe begged, to stay with that colleague friend of mine who put me up last time. After that, I only went back to my place when I needed to get clothes. I wasn't going to spend a minute longer in there than I had to, until my lettings agent sorted the move out. I paid for a moving company to pick up my belongings. They told me they had found some strange things in my apartment. There was a phrase written again and again in several places, under the bed, behind a chest of drawers, behind my computer monitor, in other blind spots in the apartment. It was my name and some woman's name, and the phrase, "Love you to the point of death." It was written on these yellow pieces of paper in red writing. They were everywhere. It was almost like witchcraft or a curse, like she had put them all over my home with the hope that they had influence over me. Were all these things she was doing to show love? The wording of that made me think of the dead insects and the cat. Was she talking about the finality of life, death, and love in the only way she could? I don't know, but like they say, there is method sometimes to the madness. I was shocked, but I could see the end in sight. Those movers calling me and telling me that everything was boxed up and the keys had been returned was like a weight off my shoulders. I have moved on now, and I am living happily and peacefully. Just don't expect me to tell you where.
I'm about 98% certain I pissed on a dead guy at Seattle's Gasworks Park on a dark New Year's night at the turn of the millennium. My friend and I were going to go see the fireworks at the Space Needle, but because terrorists had been caught sneaking tons of bombs across the Canada-American border, the authorities wouldn't let crowds near the Space Needle. So we were across Lake Union to watch from Gasworks Park. When the fireworks were over, it was dark as fuck, and I had to piss like a racehorse. We stumbled into some bushes, and I opened my fly and let loose. As I was done, I started to walk away, and my foot hit something soft, like a leg, and I freaked the fuck out and ran. My buddy chased after me, asking what's up. I told him I think I accidentally pissed on a sleeping bum, which made him laugh, and I definitely didn't want to go back to apologize, for fear of getting the shit kicked out of me. The next morning on the news, we read that a body had been found at Gasworks. I don't totally remember, but I think it was a murder of a homeless guy. The newspapers didn't mention whether he was covered in piss or not. When I was a kid and lived in my old apartment, my mom befriended the downstairs neighbor and would often invite her over for coffee and tea because she was always so lonely. A few weeks went by without hearing from her, so we both go downstairs and knock on the door. It was like a movie where when you would knock, the door slowly crept open as if it had been this way for a while. We walked inside and found her in the bathtub covered in blood, and the smell was disgusting. Apparently the lady's girlfriend left her, and she couldn't handle the pain. My mom's way of comforting me was, "Don't worry, Mark. She was our friend, so she won't haunt us." Gee, thanks, Mom. A friend and colleague of mine worked security, doing external patrols and gate duty at a remote military site. Military personnel worked inside the wire. His job was mostly just turning the public away and doing a lap around the outer fence every half hour. One night at 0300 hours, he's doing a patrol and sees a camouflaged guy move ever so slightly amongst some trees. He starts yelling at him, but the guy just stays still and doesn't respond. My buddy radios it in, and within a couple of minutes, several soldiers and vehicles roll up inside the fence. Apparently there's rules around military operating outside the fence, so they cover the unarmed and lone security guard while he approaches. Turns out, the man in the woods was off-duty army, and he'd hung himself in the tree. My buddy was never sure if the guy was still alive when he first noticed him, or if he had just moved slightly in the breeze. But either way, there was nothing he could do at this point. I've been a stay-at-home mom since 2012. This fall, my youngest started kindergarten. I have 2 girls. So it was mid-morning. Both my girls are at school, and I'm laying on my bed reading a book. I can see through my open door through the living room to the hallway that leads to the girls' room, their bathroom and playroom. I hear a noise and look up to see a middle-aged white man with blue gloves walk into my garage door. I freeze, not knowing what to do. I know my bugman. This is not him, and the guy didn't knock. He immediately heads down the hallway that is just my children's room. I call my husband. My husband calls the police and his brother, who lives 2 minutes away. He must have gone to the playroom because maybe a minute has gone by. I'm going for a weapon, and I hear my dog start to growl. She sleeps under my girl's bed during the day, and so I yell, "Here, Belle," and the man comes out to the right, where the garage door is at the front of the hallway, and my lap Belle runs to me in the room. He stutters out that no one is supposed to be home, and I say my husband is on his way now, and he mutters something as he exits the garage.
For some context, I'm in school still and work for my family member on certain weekends at a local college, selling concessions at the stadium. It's about once or twice a month, and the stadium is off towards the edge of town. It's Friday night. I just had gotten out of school, and I had to go straight to work. I get to work for about 4 hours, and my boss, my aunt, tells me we need more spoons for tomorrow's event. We sell ice cream, and these events have like 5,000 plus people at them. I say okay, I'll go grab them on my way home. The only store open with heavy-duty spoons is all the way on the other side of town, and I still wanted to go meet up with some of my friends and mess around. I decided to take the faster but more sketchy way, around the outskirts of town. I live in a weather bipolar state. It snowed last night, but I figured the roads would be fine enough, even if they weren't plowed. I take off to the store, and the first 5 minutes go by and nothing's wrong. I haven't seen a single car or any buildings the entire time. But keep in mind, it's approaching 9 p.m., and I'm on the outskirts of town. No one really takes this way unless they really have to. All of a sudden, I see something in the corner of my eye, and it looks like a man. Roughly 5'8", I'd say, wearing shorts, t-shirt, and a backwards hat. He's in a ditch, walking in snow, when it's about 10 degrees out. My first thought is to pull over, but I'm on the phone with my mum at the time, and she warns me not to, as some things have happened before in this town. For example, a couple of years ago, a college girl was kidnapped and found dead, rolled up in a rug in 2014. I consider stopping, but for some reason, I tell myself not to. I wasn't really worried about anything. I'm a young dude, driving a big pickup truck. Last type of person anyone would want to harm, right? I passed the man, going about 40 miles per hour. Like I said, roads aren't the best. I drive not even 500 feet past him, and immediately, a car that I did not see at all before turns on and pulls out of a field entrance off the road and starts to follow me. At first, I thought I was just focused on the man in the ditch and didn't see a road, and that's where they came from. But later I found out there was not a road there. Now, again, I'm not super worried. I watched my fair share of crime movies and read plenty of stories on this sub and didn't feel it was a threat yet. I start to approach the town again and have to take some turns to get where I'm going. I turn left. The car turns left. I turn right. The car turns right. I go around a roundabout and skip my turn and go twice as no one else was there. Car follows. At this point, I start to worry a little, but maybe they just need to go to the store also. I then pull up to a stop sign. It wasn't on the best side of town either, may I add, and I turn without my turn signal. The car follows. Now at this point, I should have went straight to the police station, but I still didn't think much of it. I'm 2 miles from the store, where plenty of people will be. I take a few more turns and the car continues to follow me. I completely blew a stop sign at a non-busy intersection, and the car does a quick stop and go and catches up. At this point, I'm 2 turns to the store, so I'm still not worried. I turn into the store and the car turns also. The store also has a gas station, so I pull up there first to act like I was getting gas. The car sits off to the side of the road, in between gas station and store, and just sits there. I wait about 10 minutes, and the car doesn't move. At this point, I start to get worried. I'm a young kid alone at night near the bad side of town. I call my friends I'm supposed to meet up with later on and give them the license plate for the worst case scenario. Then, take off to the store. I cross the street, and the car comes straight behind me. I'm freaking out, not knowing if I should call the cops or not. I go and park as close as possible to the store, and the car parks 3 rows behind me and a couple down. It's getting late at this point, and the store's closing soon. There's only a couple others in the lot. I turn my truck back on and go park on the complete opposite side of the lot, get out, and I completely bolt inside of the store. I'm not super overweight, but I'm not skinny either. I'm about 6'1" and 200. Who would want anything to do with me? I get spoons, take my time in the store. I go to call my friends to walk back outside, and my phone is dead. I look out the sliding doors and suddenly there's a white van next to my driver's side. It looks like no one's in it, but the back windows are covered and it's running. Big red flag. I run to customer service and explain everything, but they think I'm just some young kid messing around. At the time, I didn't see the original follow car, but no way in hell I'm going back outside with that van next to my truck. You can see from the in-store Starbucks window they talked, and both drove off. I wait another 10 minutes and dash outside. I speed to my friend's house, and when I get there, I park in his garage. My one buddy asks why there's a big orange mark on my tire. My heart sinks. When I was inside, the follow car must have marked my tire. After inspecting the rest of my truck, we find a small pipe dropped in the bed of my truck surrounded by snow. It was about 2 inches wide, and I'd say about 8 inches long, wrapped in duct tape. It was not mine. I was alone, no phone, scared, in a part of town I'm not familiar with. I try to laugh it off, but now that everyone's asleep, I can't help but think what would have happened if I walked outside. I've always been sort of ego boosted by the fact I'm a chubby fat dude that no one would want to mess with. But after tonight, I realize anyone can be targeted. So, creepy men who followed me all night and waited by my truck? Let's not meet. Update. Police came and took the pipe today. As multiple of you said, and I knew already, they can't really do anything about it as nothing really happened. They said that they'll look into the license plate, but other than that, nothing much can happen, as no crimes were committed.
My family was chilling on the back porch of our house. The only other house that isn't a mile away is our next-door neighbor. There's some wetland in the back that me and my sister play in and try to catch frogs. It was a summer evening, and we just finished dinner, and me and my sister, who was maybe like 4 or 5, got off the porch because she heard a frog, and she walked towards the tall grass and those pondweeds. She stops walking at some point and runs back over to me. She told me to look over at the grass or something, and I just ignored her for a second because I was on my phone. My stepmom must have looked up because she made us go inside. I was so confused, and when I asked her what was happening, she said that someone's outside. My dad went to look outside and said no one was there, but my stepmom was very, very sure that someone was out there in the grass. I asked her about it later on because it was a similar situation that we went through. She says she thinks it must have been a neighbor or something, but that when my dad went to investigate, there was nothing found. She said she saw a phone light coming from somewhere inside the grass, and she thought someone was talking on it. My sister said she saw a flashlight in the grass moving around, but that she can't remember seeing a person out there. My story happened a few years ago, back when I was still living with my mother. She'd recently lost her job and was going through some heavy depression, so she would occasionally go visit with my grandparents, who lived just next door. One day, I'd gotten into the shower, and she cracked the door to let me know she was going over for a bit, and that she'd be back a bit later. I figured it'd give me a little alone time, some time to play some games and just recharge, since her depression had been starting to affect me too. I get out of the shower and head into my room, which means I would have to pass her doorway. Looking in, everything seemed to be in order. Nothing looked strange or out of place. It was a weird habit that I've had that I'll look into a room as I pass by. So, as I'm in my room and drying off and dressing, I hear the sound of her sliding closet door move. This door is really heavy and impossible for the wind to move, so I figured my mom might have forgotten something and had come back to grab it, and I just didn't hear her. So, I go to look in her room, and nothing is moved. These doors make a pretty distinct sound, and I'd heard it so many times, I knew what it was immediately. My mom wasn't in her room, and she wasn't anywhere in the apartment. I was kind of freaked out, especially since I had a habit of seeing shadows on the wall moving down the hall towards our bedrooms. This apartment has always kind of spooked me a bit, but I love it all the same. I used to work at a Starbucks, and there was a regular there. His name was John. John is old enough to be my father. I'd seen him every day, and we never really even made small talk. I ended up transferring to a store down the street, and I noticed John started coming in. I thought maybe he just frequents stores in the area, no big deal, until he started bringing me gifts out of nowhere. He gave me his old Bluetooth Bose speaker, perfume, roses, a giant stuffed animal, and other things. I hadn't seen John come in for a few days, so to my surprise, I'm on break, and someone comes and tells me he's asking for me. He hands me this straw hat with painted birds all over and says, "I just got back from Mexico. I saw this hat, and it reminded me so much of you, and I knew you had to have it." To top the cake, I'd graduated college while I was working there. John comes in probably a week later with a bunch of pizzas and congratulates me for my victory. I never told him or really made a big deal about it at work. This is a customer who I went from seeing every day for 2 years with minimal contact to absolute off the deep end, out of thin air.
This happened about 4 years ago. I had just graduated from high school and was a month and a half into summer break. Needing money for college, I began working full-time for the school district I just graduated from. Due to musical festivals I wanted to attend, as well as monetary concerns, I did not go with my family to North Carolina. Which was fine by me. What 18-year-old doesn't want to be at a house by themselves for the week? Furthermore, my parents' house is out in the country, so I had little to no fear about the neighbors complaining about parties or being bothered in any way whatsoever. But I was wrong. I often take the back roads home from my friend's house, but on that night, I decided I wanted some McDonald's, so I took the main drag and came home on a different route. This way takes you past a mechanic shop, not a mile away from our cul-de-sac. It was between midnight and 1 a.m., and as I passed the mechanic shop, I noticed a car turn its lights on. Or should I say, light, for the car had only one headlight working. I remember thinking how strange it was that this car all of a sudden turned its lights on as I was passing, and began to become even more concerned when it pulled out behind me. But I tend to be paranoid by nature. Nothing serious, but I always question if the person behind me is following me or whether they mean me harm. So I brushed this off as an unfortunate coincidence. But as I near my street and the car is still tailing me, I started to become freaked out. I looked at my gas tank, and my heart sunk as I saw it was on the E. Either I pull on my street and go home, or I risk driving around some and seeing if this dude follows. Yet that option held the risk of my car running out of gas and leaving me stranded on the road. And I figure I'd rather take my chances on my own soil than on some dark, lonely country back road. So I turn into my street, only to have my heart sink when the one headlamp car makes the right turn behind me. At this point, I know I'm screwed. With nothing left to do, I began pulling my driveway. It's a hill about 100 yards long. Only to my utter horror, they began to follow me up. Looking back, I should have called the cops. But there's no love lost between law enforcement and myself at the time. I was too caught up to even consider calling them. If my family would have just been home, this would have never happened. I could have called my dad, and he could have grabbed his gun. But he, along with the rest of my family, were gone. 12 hours away at the beach. So, when they began to drive up my freeway after me, I stopped and put my car in reverse. They responded to my reversing as well, yet they stopped at the bottom efficiently, blocking my driveway. At this point, I began pulling forward, again, only to have the same jig and dance happen. They followed. I reversed. They reversed, and sat at the end, blocking my escape. I quickly pulled up and turned my car around to come at them head on. By this time, they were halfway up my driveway, the furthest they have come up. Looking back, I was terrified, alone, and angry. Who did this person think they were? With my bright lights on, shining right into their face, I opened my car door and got out. I pulled out my pocket knife and grasped it onto my left hand while I grabbed my hammer on my right. I used to keep one in between my seat and door. In some weird, desperate mindset, I made a split decision to grab my hammer from the head with the handle sticking out. My hope was that it would be mistaken as a gun. I began yelling and pointing my hammer/gun at the car, screaming at them to "Get the fuck out!" and "What do you want, you motherfucker?" All the while, I held my hammer as a gun and prayed they would fall for it. Whether they did or not, I cannot say. Part of me believes that they thought it was a gun, due to my bright lights being behind them, making the whole side of the shadow, yet they could have just not want to fight. Perhaps they thought I was a girl, or was timid, and wouldn't reset so aggressively and violently. But who knows? It worked. They slowly back out of my driveway and crept around the cul-de-sac. As they were leaving my street, I ran after them, hiding behind my neighbors' houses. And at every driveway, the car would slow down to a near stop, as if scoping out the houses. Thankfully, they didn't pull into any driveways, and they turned off my street altogether. After I was safely into my house, I ate my McDonald's by the front window with all the lights off, waiting to see if they come creeping back. Thankfully, they didn't, but that night, I locked every door in my house, which I always did anyways, and slept with my hammer, machete, and baseball bat next to me, and pocket knife under the pillow. Complete overkill, I know, but I was terrified. Now I know where my dad keeps his gun, so if this ever happens again, I'll be prepared.
I'm a 23-year-old female staying in Paris at a hostel with 4 beds to a room. This man introduces himself. He tells me to take these vitamins he had. I kept saying no, and he keeps pushing, and he asks why I'm afraid to take them. I told him I don't need vitamins from him. Later that night, he invites me to go out with him and tells me he'll show me a good time. He offers me a bottle of wine, which I decline. At about 10, he heads down to the bar and tells me he'll wait 1 hour for me to come. I planned on going out that night, but obviously not with him. He comes up at 11 and asks me why I didn't come. I told him that I wasn't going out that night. After he left, I got ready for the club and headed there. I had a great night and got home at around 9 a.m. He was in the back room and was angry at me for going out without him. He was literally yelling at me. Immediately, I go downstairs and request a room change. It was New Year's Eve and my birthday. Myself and 2 of my friends were out the front of my house listening to music on my iPod. We were about 12 at the time, and there was no one else around. It was probably 10 to 10:30 at night, and we were waiting for the illegal fireworks to light up down the street. It probably sounds a bit weird, 12-year-old kids by themselves at 12:30 p.m. listening to Katy Perry in the middle of the street, but it wasn't too unusual. You see, my neighborhood is very close. We know all of our neighbors really well, so our parents and ourselves weren't at all concerned. We were listening to Hot and Cold by Katy Perry. Yes, it was that time of the decade. We were jamming along to it when we began to hear a whistle. Now, first off, it sounded like it was part of the song, so initially everyone ignored it. But that was until it started to distort and go out of rhythm to the music playing. It didn't seem to be in tune with the song, and it was eerily out of pitch. I don't know why. Maybe to hear it better, but my friend decided to pause the music. Maybe it was just in the song, or maybe the phone was glitching. As soon as the music stopped, the whistling continued. Pitchy and slow. We were a little spooked. It was dark outside, other than a few streetlights on the road. We couldn't really see much or make much out of the darkness, other than the strange whistling. We were able to pinpoint the direction it was coming from soon enough. We turned towards it and froze. About 10 meters from where we stood, just on the edge of the street lamp's light, was a man. He looked quite disheveled, most likely homeless, and he was just standing there looking at us, whistling that godforsaken, pitchy whistle. We were all frozen for a while, as I guess we were caught off guard, until my fight or flight kicked in. I yelled at my friends to get inside, and they began to scream and run up the driveway. I pushed and shoved them forward, terrified because I don't know whether they could hear what I was hearing, but the whistling had finally stopped. But there was something else drowning out the silence. Heavy-setted footsteps. He was chasing after us. I screamed bloody murder at them, opening the front door and shoving them inside, not caring if I hurt them. I turned and slammed the deadbolt just as he reached the screen door. I watched as this figure came into view. He was dirty, wearing soiled, long-sleeved clothes, had an unkempt beard, and wore a torn beanie. As I closed the door, he stopped just ahead of the screen, looked me dead in the eye, and murmured something that still makes my skin crawl. Damn it. One of my friends consoled the other, who was now in tears. As I watched this man through the peephole, he lingered for a second more, then disappeared into the blackness. I remember my friends grabbing me, asking if I was okay, and then pointing down to my hands. I was shaking like a leaf. We never told our parents. This was over 10 years ago, and it still creeps me out to think of what would have happened if we hadn't noticed the out-of-place whistling. This happened a while ago. It was a weekend, so I was alone in my house. I was playing video games when I got a notification from my doorbell camera. There was a man outside. His beard was ruffled, and to be honest, he looked like someone who was homeless. I asked him what he was doing there. He responded with, "Doesn't Nancy live here?" I told him no and that he should leave. He didn't take kindly to that and kept insisting that he needed to meet Nancy. I told him again that there was no Nancy and that he had the wrong house. I was freaked out because none of my neighbors are named Nancy. My name isn't Nancy. No one I know was named Nancy. I watched him as he stood there, looking at the camera. He was mumbling something about Nancy over and over. He then sat down on my porch steps for some time, waiting. I told him to leave or I'd take action. He just sat there. After about 10 minutes, he walked away. The man didn't even have a car or anything. He walked. I thought it was very eerie and creepy. The fact he was so stubborn on it. I waited some time before even heading downstairs. I was scared he would be at my door again. After an hour or two, I did though. I have not seen that man since, and I hope I never will. I hope you enjoyed that, guys. Thank you again to my guests for joining me. I want to give a special mention to J Nightmares for sourcing and translating some of these stories from Japanese. Check out his channel for more stories you haven't heard before. Links to all of my guests' channels can be found in the description. Thank you to all of you for every listen, like, comment, and share. We surpassed 60k subscribers, and I wanted to put this video out as a way to thank all of you. It wouldn't be possible without each and every one of you. As always, I want to give a shout out to my channel members and patrons for their support. A huge thanks to Killian's Place, April, James Arterburn, Jen, Joy, Handout, Pegasus Genesis, Karen Keating, V. Berry, LJ, Fiona X Fox, Scott, I Like Booty, Monica Level Ace, Chris and Donna, Holly Spry, Kimber, Jasmine, Sanatix, Heather Haven, Kitty Cat Luna 2, ADHD Aurora, Janice, Cinderella Baby, Borderline Betty, Lady Dracard, Erica Nicole, Snowball Rathina, Melanie, The Honeybee 987, Pretty Girl 215, Ryan, Brooke, Wendy, Crafty Kel, Tina, Dina, Vampy Debs, Patricia, Amber, Krista, Brenda, Absinthe Alice, Christy, Kay, Spider's Web, Ooh La La Andrea, Sue, Monique, Sean Gorman, Emma Lisa, Sigma Cube X, Greg, Chelsea, Amanda Jane, Sam, Zeb Tepe, Sarah C., Austin, Tegan, Lil Smart, Jenny, Gabrielle, Fire05, Sarah P., James Gargano, Gemma Allen, Monica Level Ace, and Alex. Thanks for listening. I'll see you all in the next one.